Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались з кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення.
Я завтра їду на Україну, яку покинув так давно. Цілую, ставши на коліно, своє полкове знамено. Дивлюсь на нього я востаннє, у нез'ясованій журбі. Всю кров мою, всі скитання, воно вібрало у собі.
Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Yes.
The Leaf Street Army sends its regards.
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 235 of the news.
And of course, we're going to be reporting on the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine here on day 235. And the huge news today is that there has been a partisan attack on a training camp in Belgorod where 3 gunmen fired at the conscripts, killing 16 and wounding an additional 17. From what we know in the news in Belgorod, we were not able to get any picture or video evidence of this, but this was something that was reported in both Ukrainian and Russian media, which starts to make it seem very truthful. It appears that 2 of these gunmen were killed, the 3rd is on the run, but the damage to the training camp and the conscripts there has been quite significant. As we can see here in this little picture of the link, this is International Observers Ukraine. 13 people were killed and 16 were injured, and I heard the number just before the stream has now gotten up to 16 and then 17 injured, apparently. And so it looks like things are starting to get a little hot inside of Russia, and it seems as though conscripts won't be able to be trained safely in most places and in most occasions because now they're going to be coming under partisan attacks before they get any kind of official training. This is a little bit interesting to me, and probably showing that there's a lot of dissent in Russia against the government and also the current mobilization. Not only that, but these conscripts were probably going through pretty much squalor before they got to this training camp where they met their very soon and quick demise. As we can see here, that as the mobilization continues in Russia, the woes and the issues that they've all been facing has not gotten any better. Here's a video that says it's from Svatove, but we put it inside of Russia because it's speaking of the conditions that these conscripts are facing.
We are mobilized.
One second, I'm actually going to have to mute this. And speaking of which, thinking about this, it looks like we may have problems if we showed that on stream. So unfortunately, I will not be able to show this clip, but if y'all would like to watch it, please make sure to go down to the link in the description below, click on the link, and you can view it for yourself right there. And so with that, we're now going to be moving out of that little bit of news because I think we may run into copyright issues with it. And we're going to be moving over to Kherson, where we can see the mobilization woes in a much better light and how the Russians are kind of living in these places. And I have to say, this is not the way a first-rate superpower would house their conscripts. So here's the video.
Ни кроссовок, ни тактики нету. Вон я сейчас вот в уставке хожу. Куда нас переселили, так сказать? Шатер, все, видео, фотки, я тебе потом скину. Сейчас, подожди, заду. Это все хантыцы. Все наши пацаны. Сами трупы ищем, сами ***ем, потому что по-другому никак не получится. Вот это вот располага. Чтобы ты понимал, сегодня мы спали с одной буржуйкой. На такую располагу, одну буржуйку, она не...
Just look at the conditions they're living in, like a Franklin stove in the middle of the tent, and then we go back outside for a second, just sacks of potatoes just sitting out in the wide open, and just garbage. They're living like it's the Middle Ages out here at this conscript camp. And it's showing you that they're not really going to be high-quality troops, especially since their shelter and their housing, pretty much, their barracks, are literally just tents in the middle of nowhere.
Вот это вот располага. Чтобы ты понимал, сегодня мы спали с одной буржуйкой. На такую располагу, одну буржуйку, она не поможет. Сам слышишь, какой у меня голос. Голос капец какой осипший. Половина попростывала пацанов.
And apparently due to the terrible conditions out there, almost half of them have some kind of a virus, like a cold or something similar. The guy's like, "You hear my hoarse voice, it's because I have cold. Everyone has cold."
Я тебе сейчас фотки еще скину. На каких матрацах нас заставляли жить. Пока сами тоже, так сказать, не украли. Потому что по-другому здесь прожить нельзя. Отойдешь просто от палатки, у тебя даже буржуйки украдут. Они...
Hey man, they're living in Detroit, in Russia. He says if you move away from the tent, even your pot belly stoves will be stolen.
Oh no.
Man, can't have crap in Razan.
Бабки. У тебя даже буржуйки украдут, а не то, что вещи. У меня вот, допустим, ни кроссовок теперь нету, ни денег нету. И как мне сказал этот ваш заместитель Комаровой, я тебе что, мамочка, папочка, ищи сам.
Now let's go back and go through this video real quick nearer to the end. And let's look at the stupidity of the Russian command and also what they're having to go through.
Жить нельзя. Отойдешь просто
So,
руки,
we already
украдут,
covered the potbelly stoves
а не
comment.
то, что
Then he says, not to mention personal
вещи.
items.
У меня вот
I, for example, now have neither money nor sneakers. This man has had the money and his own shoes stolen from right out from under him from another Russian in the camp. And he has no idea where they went. He's just shoeless and moneyless now. And he's just wandering around eating potatoes out of a potbelly stove wearing no shoes. Probably it's this guy right here in front of him that stole his J's. Yeah, man.
допустим, ни кроссовок теперь нету.
Imagine that kind of discipline being non-existent, where you can't even trust your own unit to not steal your stuff once you're out of range of it. Now, that is something crazy to think about, and it's almost like this is already some kind of a penal battalion made up of prisoners with how they're acting.
Ни денег нету. И как мне сказали,
And so now the deputy of the Komarova, which is the deputy commander of the unit, tells this guy, look for yourself. What do I look like? Your mom or your dad? What in the world? The guy's getting his stuff stolen from by other guys in the unit. And the response to this commander is, what do I look like? Your mom? Deal with it. Like, that's not really a good message to send to the Russian soldiers that are making up this unit, is that if stuff gets stolen from if another guy steals stuff from you, you just got to go and deal with it yourself. You either got to go and beat the guy up and try and take it back, or find it, or steal someone else's stuff. Imagine this unit on the front lines with this kind of ideology. You know, like one Russian is without a gun, his gun just got damaged. He just steals the gun out from the other guy while he's napping. He wakes up under mortar fire or in a firefight, and he doesn't even know where his gun is because another guy's using it because he just stole it right off of him. Imagine something like that happening in the U.S. It would make national news if this kind of stuff was just rife like it is in this Russian training camp in America. But of course, with it being Russia, what do I look like? Your mom or your dad? Find your stuff.
сказал этот ваш заместитель Комаровой, я тебе что, мамочка, папочка, ищи сам.
So with that's the end of the video. But once again, it's not really looking all that great for the conscripts in Russia. And I think with this image continuously coming out over and over again of what they're having to deal with and the kind of supplies they're being issued before they're sent to the front lines, I don't have high hopes for these Russians whatsoever. In fact, if we return back to Belgorod, the situation in Russia while these conscripts are in training isn't getting any better either, as apparently a Ukrainian missile or some kind of projectile hit some kind of a fuel silo in Belgorod. We don't know if this is really an oil silo, but it is some kind of silo with flammable material in it that's now on fire. The Russians are also trying to reap a little bit of fear out of the Ukrainian public right now, and it appears that there have been some interesting developments in Belarus as well. Starting off in the area of Orsk, or Orsha, which is probably the best way to say it, we can see tanks on the move. We don't know which directions these are heading in, but it's probably easy to say that these are probably heading to Russia to try and help supply their failing war effort. Also, we can hear some pretty trash music. And we see the train moving along. And we can also see this guy wearing a high-vis vest standing on the middle of another railroad track waiting for this one to pass. That's what you call a human bowling ball, because if a train hits him, he's just going to go flying down the track. Probably not a smart idea to be standing there, but then again, it's Belarus. And while Belarus hasn't gotten a lot of a bad rap in this war because they haven't really done anything, they're pretty much similar to Russia in a lot of regards. Just look at their equipment. It's nothing but T-72As. This guy is also standing in the middle of the rail yard. Once again, to reiterate this, that is not really a smart idea when it comes to railroad safety. And so with that, that's the end of the video. And once again, really interesting to see that the Belarusians are shipping out poor quality T-72As, probably to try and help the Russian war effort, or they could be shipping them south because we've now seen pictures and confirmation that the Russians are moving back into Belarus and they're setting up camps in this area. Is this something to freak the Ukrainians out and have them reposition their forces? Most likely. I do not see the Russians being competent nor capable at this point in the war to be able to launch a brand new offensive built entirely from scratch from the ground up in the northern area of Ukraine. So I think that these troops in this video was made entirely for the reason of panicking the Ukrainian armed forces and to moving more soldiers north towards Kyiv where there is no fighting, so that way the Russians on the southeastern and southern fronts can have a little bit more of a reprieve. So here's this video. You can see the Russians appearing to unload some trucks. We can also see the passenger rail cars moving out.
Мы прибыли на белорусскую землю. Честно скажу, встреча была неожиданная, очень теплая, очень приятно. Мы приехали в Республику Беларусь оказать помощь братскому белорусскому народу.
You see him handing out the only food in the unit.
It's
one pie.
Получим от командования. То есть у нас настроение всех боевое, дух боевой, готовы выполнить любые задачи.
God, what was that?
That was awful.
That was horrendous. Let's listen to that again. Oh, God. That was supposed to be the Russian anthem, but that really just sounded like dying animals. I don't know about y'all, but maybe they ought to not have a very crappy military band come around anytime soon. Now, the Russians always made fun of other people, like I believe it was Egypt and Saudi Arabia that played the Russian anthem poorly. But I think the Russians just butchered the anthem worse than anyone else around the world has ever butchered their anthem, just right here in this video. Once again, I do not think at all that these soldiers will be used in any kind of offensive in the north, and of course I've listed off those reasons probably a million times, so to save myself some breath, we won't go through them again. But these soldiers are most likely being moved into this area to try and create some kind of a ruse, so that way hopefully the Ukrainians will fall for the ruse and start moving forces further north. With that, we're now going to be moving into Poland, because not only are the Russians moving around a lot of units and also having a lot of calamities occur close to the border, the United States and NATO inside of Poland, along with Germany, and the rest of NATO for that matter, are also doing their own little bit of special military operations and trying to help out in their own way. We can see that the Germans are helping out by moving some Panzerhaubitze 2000s into Ukraine. We can see a whole new load of them along with some additional vehicles being transported to Ukraine in this video. Right there we can see some kind of a command in 113, I believe. So you see 4 Panzerhaubitze 2000s.
Mit schwerem Lärm und hier wird schweres Gerät verladen auf die Schiene. Tja, das ist Deutschland. Es fehlen die Worte.
Wow, is that the sound of the Panzer?
It is. That is the sound
That
of the
is
Panzer.
nice.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Let's listen to that again.
Fehlen die Worte.
Man, that thing sounds
Man.
good.
That is a nice clean hum.
But that is, I would have to say, whatever engine that thing's got, I want it in the next Dodge Hellcat. And so with that, we're going to be moving on into the next clip of news out of Poland. But once again, it's nice to see that the Germans are finally starting to step up in mass. And not only are they sending Iris-Ts, it looks like they may also be sending more Panzerhaubitzes on their way to Ukraine. These things are incredibly competent, very spacious, and quite luxurious as far as SPGs go, in both its fire rate, crew comfort, and ergonomics. It's just top of the line. I would have to compare it, if anything, to the Caesar SPG from France. And so with that, we're now going to be moving out of Poland and back on into Ukraine and covering a couple of our location unknowns. We have about 7 of them, so we're going to cover 4 of them, and then we will be moving on into a question segment. So starting off, we can see some Stingers being used to shoot down some Russian aircraft. We don't know exactly what kind they are. The caption says they're air targets, and I think that might be a little bit more depth. Also, we can hear the music always playing. You can see them lining up these Stingers to fire. And they fired off the first one, goes streaking through the wheat field up towards his target. We can now see them aiming another Stinger. And with that, that's the end of the video. But once again, really interesting to see that the Ukrainians are starting to use manpads for everything. The manpad's like the be-all, fix-all for the ground-to-air situation right now. If there's a cruise missile, Stinger or an Igla. If there's a drone, Stinger or an Igla. If there's anything in the sky, use a Stinger or an Igla. It looks like the Ukrainians are starting to use these things to a higher degree now on video evidence, and I hope that they continue to use them as much as they can as the war goes on. They seem to be fairly effective at this point. Moving on into our next bit of location unknown news, we can also see that the Ukrainians were able to destroy a little Tiger armored car in an ambush. We can see them on the side of the road. We can also see the Tiger up there. The hood's already popped open. Now see this guy having to tackle the sludge.
Этот чувак только что въебал тигра, ебать, с РПГ, нахуй. А этот тихо, тоже что-то въебал.
And I gotta, Randy, what in the world is Socrates doing on the front lines? This man looks like, hang on. Socrates. Yeah, he looks like Socrates. I knew it.
That first picture was so accurate.
Yeah, like this one right here. Look. That's Socrates. He's going out there to the front line saying, "What is a man?" Well, it's we're going to make sure it's no longer a Russian. But still, it's really cool to see that the Ukrainians are doing an incredibly good job at ambushing the Russian armed forces, and it's nice to see that they took out a Tiger. And it's also good to see that they have such renowned philosophers on their side, like Socrates. Now, we're going to have to keep this guy in mind going on forward here in the future, that there is a Socrates out there on the battlefield, and if we see another video, we'll be keeping our eyes out on Socrates and seeing if he pops up in another one. And so with that, we're moving on to the next bit of news, where you see a drone destroying some more Russian vehicles. We see it drop the first bomblet, hitting the APC. When you see them continuously hitting this ABC with a little bombers, it looks like they're getting somewhere finally. When you see the smoke billowing out of the APC at this point. And with that, that's the end of the video, and it's pretty interesting to see that the Ukrainians used these tiny little egg-sized bomblets to take out an APC. I'm sure that it was actually quite cost-effective when you really think about it, to take that APC out that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably with drone bomblets that only cost a few hundred at most. And so with that, we are going to be moving on into the next clip of news from the location unknown, from the location unknowns, where we can see a very low-flying Su-27, and I mean it is low-flying, and also Ukrainian. So here's the video, and also, happily enough, it doesn't have any music.
That's mean. That
is mean. So let's go back real quick. Let's look at that again. Looks like it doesn't have anything on its hard points, but that is clearly a Ukrainian Su-27. You see the Trident right there, and that really cool blue, white, and light blue camouflage that they always have on their aircraft. It's a really nice looking one. That is just so cool.
That is so cool.
And so with that, that's the end of that video, and we're now going to be moving on into our last 3 bits of Location Unknown news. But before we get to those, it is now time for us to take a quick moment to address some questions from the chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, folks. So we do have 2 polls to address, as usual, for our first question segment. And the first poll said, do you think that disease is likely running rampant in Russia's army due to a lack of hygiene? It looks like 83% said yes, it's very likely. 12% said, no idea. and 5% said no, probably not. Now for me, seeing what I'm seeing on these videos, it looks like hygiene is not a priority for the Russians. Basically, surviving is hard enough, so they're not worried about staying clean or keeping a clean base or camp. So I would probably take a guess and say that yes, probably disease and viruses are probably running rampant. Although we really haven't heard much about like how anything like viruses. I don't want to mention the specific one because I think YouTube might not like that. But Enforcer, have we heard anything like specific about that?
I would have to. We haven't heard a lot specifically about hygiene and virology. But interesting fact, Matt, did you know that modern hygiene, in the sense we know it today, with it being bacteria focused, it came about in World War One. It really came in vogue then.
Really?
Yeah, and so for every war before that, we were still kind of working off of the principle of the four humors, if you know anything about that old, antiquated, kind of like medical philosophy.
I don't know anything about that.
Really? Okay, so real quick, we're going to go down a really quick rabbit hole, because the hygiene is something that we haven't talked about a lot on this stream, but is incredibly important, especially when keeping camp. Of course, we've seen that the Russians live in trash and squalor every single time we ever see their camps, but we've never really talked about why that is important, or the history behind military hygiene, at least. And so, in case y'all don't know, there used to be this old medical principle that diseases were caused by an imbalance in between four humors in your body. And so let's go and look at these real quick. It's oddly enough, it's really weird when you look at it. So here's the 16th century illustration, and that tells you how long this idea had been around, of what really caused sickness. So you had these four humors: phlegm, blood, yellow bile, and black bile. And those four different humors made up a healthy body. Interesting enough, this is one part that's really gross about medieval medicine, is that the way physicians back then would test if you're healthy or not, and I almost gagged right there thinking about it, is that they would have their patients urinate, and then they would taste their urine, and based off of the taste, they would tell them what humors are imbalanced and what they should take. So by and large, you were probably better off back then not going to a physician, because it was all quackery. But moving on from that, and also some people are saying bile, it's probably, yeah, it's bile, or so everyone's like, bile, it's bile, not bile.
Definitely not bile.
Yeah, I'm sorry, everyone, I'm sorry. So it's bile, so we'll go with that. Anyways, that's what medicine really revolved around. And of course, we can see here on Wikipedia that it says it began to fall out of favor in the 1850s, but even up until the 1870s and 80s, the idea of humorism, like this right here, was still prevalent in military medicine. It was only in World War I that we would see that humorism was completely replaced with germ theory, which is what we use to this day in medicine. So going off of that, that's where we get modern ideas of hygiene and cleanliness. It really just comes from the experiences and the success of the germ theory in the First World War. So I hope that interested everyone with that short little rabbit hole. And getting back to hygiene, Russian camps do not look hygienic at all, even by World War I standards. Because we go back to this camp in Kherson and we look at it again. Let's look at the conditions of their food alone. Let's just break everything down and say why it's definitely not hygienic. And I don't think you have to be an expert to look at this. You can be a layman and say this stuff is gross. So we can see that there's random trash all over the place, like right there, that isn't being cleaned up. When you see as he walks through and he takes a right turn, when you see that their food is clearly in contact with the wet, nasty ground below them. And so who knows what kind of bacteria, what kind of germs could be climbing onto these sacks of potatoes while they're sitting there and just seeping into the potatoes. A really nice thought to think about. Also, you can see that they have these rusted pipes sitting on the potatoes as well, and so I'm sure they're getting their supplements of iron each day off of the rust that's on the potatoes. And as they move in, of course, trash everywhere. You can see trash all over the ground. He gets into the tent, and you see more trash, just nothing but trash, in between the floorboards, on the bunks, everywhere. And you see this little Franklin stove. Now, the heat, usually when you cook something, the heat usually does kill the germs. But at the same time, if your food's being kept in such an unhygienic way, and your soldiers are so lazy, who in the world would even assume that the food is being cooked properly? What if it's undercooked? What if they didn't kill the germs? You know, and of course this guy says half of them have a cold, and that's of course because of the wet, damp, and very, I guess you could say, not optimal conditions that they're living in. So already half of them have gotten some kind of a sickness, so I guess you could say they're down with the sickness. But by and large, I do not think that any Russian camp is hygienic at all, especially the ones we've seen on the front lines, where they literally start living in trash piles. That is certainly not clean, it's not hygienic, and I'm sure a lot of them are catching some kinds of illness because of it. And so with that, I hope
I just saw Jeff say in the live chat about tetanus. And yes, that's a lot of rusty metal laying around. And I'm sure they don't have tetanus shots on hand anywhere, would be my guess.
Probably not at all. I mean, tetanus is the closest thing that Russians have ever gotten to tetanus is playing a game of Tetris. So I don't think they know anything about tetanus at all. They probably think, oh, cool, a cool blank square game that plays Coral Bianchi in the background. But with that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next poll said, what do you think about the possibility of Belarus invading Ukraine? It looks like 39% said it is unlikely, 31% said it is somewhat likely, while 15% said it is very likely, and 15% said it is very unlikely. So overall, it appears that folks are right in the middle. They're not sure if it's really likely, and they're not sure if it's really unlikely. So Enforcer, how do you interpret those results?
I would have to err with the large majority of y'all to say that it's probably unlikely. Of course, now going into the rabbit hole now because the poll's up and it's a good time, we already know that the Russians cannot supply any kind of meaningful resources to the conscripts inside of Russia, so what kind of sense would it make considering that those units are just being raised, and that's usually when they're at their best equipment-wise, is right when they are formed as a unit. Beyond that, it's just trying to keep up to the standard that was set at the very start. Going off of that, there's no way that these units that have most likely been in Ukraine already or have been sitting around inside of Russia are at any kind of fighting condition or could be supported in any way. Russian logistics have already collapsed in the southeast and inside of Russia itself, and so it wouldn't make any sense to add an additional amount of supply lines and supply hubs that would be needed again inside of Belarus and launch a successful offensive with that in mind. I just don't see that happening. So with that, I would have to say it is also unlikely, almost entirely. I think that's being done as a ruse. The Russians know that they can transport these troops into this area, probably with no equipment, and try and keep them alive by feeding them and giving them the bare minimums to survive, and beyond that, they probably won't do anything extra. And so with that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well, and we are on into the next one if we have one, and if we don't, we're into them questions.
All right, so we're now moving into our super chats, and up first, of course, we have a super chat from Mark, Slava, Ukraine, who puts in a very generous $75 donation. He says, no panzers for you, Uncle Vlad. A question, have you heard there's currently a push from Ukraine in Kherson?
Yes, we have. I did not include that in tonight's news because we haven't been able to say whether it's successful or not, and I think that would be something more so for tomorrow's news when we can actually show the progress in the ground covered. But we do have, I believe, 1 or 2 videos in that area today showing Ukrainian forces advancing in unknown locations in Kherson, so we have heard about it, but we didn't make it tonight's major news attraction. I thought that the conscript situation was incredibly interesting and definitely showing that even if there was a push inside of Kherson, that the conscripts that the Russians are kind of banking on to turn this war around, they're not going to be turning the war around, and most of them are getting put to sleep before they could even get out of the training camps. But since you said that, and it seems like a lot of people have been saying that in the live chat, I'm actually going to change the title of tonight's stream, since we do have video evidence to back it up, to the Ukrainians are massive push in Kherson. Russians. Well, I can't put that in. Are you please? So there we go. We'll save that. So there we go. We've now changed the title. Look at that. It was that easy. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. And also, no panzers for old Uncle Vladdy up there. Vladdy, my boy, is getting very scared at this point because they're running out of tanks, and there's no way we can say that they're not. They're pulling out T-62Ms. We're starting to see regular train shipments of tanks from Belarus going into Russia, and Belarus hardly has a tank force comparable in size to the Russian Federation, and that tells you that in terms of operational tanks, they are starting to scrape the barrel, and they are probably trying to speed their way into rushing some into service, even if they are hardly operational. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Mark. You've been helping these streams to keep on running massively with your support, and I thank everyone who helps these streams to keep running. The viewer support is the only thing we're able to run off of, and thanks to y'all, we're able to keep this thing going. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support, and thank you for helping this channel to keep running. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, folks, please remember that while we do appreciate the support very, very much, and it does help to keep us running, like the Enforcer said, we do take live chat questions, and if you have one and don't want to put in a super chat, please tag me at Enforcer Matt in your message and add your question behind it, and I'll put it in our spreadsheet, and we can probably, maybe, get around to your question before the stream ends. So moving on to our next super chat.
Real quick, Matthew, that's actually a great point to bring up. We actually always make sure every single night, although sometimes it's not a high number, sometimes it's only like 5 to 7 questions, but we try and answer live chat questions. We don't make people pay to have questions asked. We don't make people pay to be in the live chat. You can come into the live chat and just enjoy being here, and you can enjoy watching this stream without having to put in anything in terms of having to watch an ad, because we don't run ads. It's ad free. So we don't make any kind of ad revenue on any of this stuff. We also don't make you pay for a membership so that way you can talk in the chat. We don't do any of that. And honestly, I don't really like that. That's just trying to monetize and grab at straws for anything, and we don't do that. I would rather y'all enjoy it and us take kind of a hit instead of trying to like force y'all to pay for stuff. At that point, I feel like it's almost like a Disney World experience where you're like walking from point A to point B, and they're like, "Hey, pay $5 to go to the next part of the park." You know, it's like, come on, it's like, don't be like that. That's kind of that's not really nice. And so with that, I hope that addresses that real quick, because I want you to know, please feel free to ask a million questions in the chat. We can't get to all of them because there's about like 20,000 live chat messages that are sent in, but we will make sure to try and answer some of the most interesting ones we're able to get. And so with that, we are on to the next one with that in mind.
And yes, Olsen Duran, I saw that in the live chat, and yes, that caught me off guard a little bit, seeing that for the first time tonight, that the fellow was charging for that. Quite interesting choice to take, but we won't get too deep into that. But anyways, up next we have a $20 super chat from White Lightning 777, who says, the Russian government has a well-deserved reputation for violence. It's soft on Russia cowards that'll cause Putin to use nukes if he does. Reagan was right. Peace through strength. F-16s, Abrams tanks needed.
And I thank you for the support. And real quick, Matthew, can I have you reread that so that way I can catch the first part?
Yes. He said, the Russian government has a well-deserved reputation for violence. It's soft on Russia cowards that'll cause Putin to use nukes if he does. Reagan was right. Peace through strength.
And that, once again, thank you for the support. And to address that, the Russians do have a reputation for being vicious. In fact, I would have to say it's not even a vicious as in, oh, fear them militarily. It's more like, where is their morality? Because if you look at the Red Army in the Second World War, the Red Army has to be the sole organization in the world that consisted of the largest amount of rapists that there had ever been. And I mean, and that sounds like a very strong claim. But when you go back and look at the numbers, when the Red Army marched through somewhere, hide the women. I mean, they were going to get everyone in sight. If they saw a woman, they were going to get them. It's honestly sickening, and it really makes the Eastern Front of the Second World War dark as hell, especially when you know what the Red Army was doing as they were moving through these areas, most of the time inside of the Soviet Union. And then they get to Poland and Germany, and it got even worse. It just got progressively worse as they covered more ground. And I would have to say that kind of barbarism is pretty sick, and it's really, really sick to think that the Russian, I guess you could say the nation of Russia, whether it was the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, or the Russian Federation, they had been known for this kind of brutality forever. A long time ago on stream, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, we covered the history of a Russian general that was dealing with a Circassian revolt inside of Chechnya and Dagestan, and he would actually have Circassians killed in droves and then have parts of their bodies boiled and then keep them in trunks below his bed. And that kind of stuff, historically, in Russian history, is just kind of normal. And that's really sick. And so, with that, I thank you for the support. Sadly, I cannot get political with Reagan, but I can say one thing, that Lord Horatio Nelson, to use a more politically neutral figure, said, if you want peace, prepare for war. And I think that's a fairly good statement, a fairly accurate one as well. And that's what the United States always, pretty much, ever since we become a superpower, has worked off of, is that if we want to make sure that world peace is ensured, our nation must be ready for war at a moment's notice. And for that reason, I do think that we should continue to send supplies and arms to Ukraine, and we should even try and up the kind of equipment that is being sent. Why not stop at M777s? Why not send over M1A1 Abrams that we've just retired from the Marine Corps? Why not send over F-16s? Why not, we can't fly them over the border because, the Russians have drawn a line in the sand that we could probably easily cross, but why not send them over in part sets and just have them built in Ukraine, But I do thank you so much for the support, and with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again, and we're on to the final question of this segment.
All right, and the final question of this segment goes to Oats Air, who puts in a $20 donation and says, have to be early today. Before I'm no more, as I'm currently stuck in the middle of nowhere. So let's get an answer from the chat. Slava LSA and Slava Ukraine.
And I'll thank you so much for the support, Oyster. I know that you're not going to be on probably when this is being read, but I do thank you so much nonetheless. And we are going to make sure to answer that live chat in your honor. And also, thank you so much, Oyster, for putting in all of the support that you have. It helps out this channel massively. And once again, without viewers like y'all, it's not possible. And so with that, let's get a live chat question.
All right, so that live chat question goes to Matthew Lane, who says, do you think the war will end before Christmas, as some so-called experts have predicted?
I don't think the war will end by Christmas. That's one thing I feel fairly certain about. The Ukrainians are making landfill amounts of ground. I mean, they're taking swaths of it by the week at this point. But I still don't see it ending by Christmas. In fact, I'm starting to lean more towards the category of there may be a ceasefire declared at some point in time, and then this war will enter a permanent state of stasis, nearly. And of course, I know a lot of people are like, what? That's not really the desired end goal, and that's not really my desired end goal either. I would rather see the Ukrainians win, the Russian government kind of have a little bit of a change of leadership, and then the war end with a conditional term of surrender for the Russians, in a way where they'll just back out of the war, or a treaty. I guess a peace treaty would be the better way to say that. However, it seems as though the Russians, at least for now, are hell-bent and determined on not ending this war regardless of their situation, and the Ukrainians are hell-bent and determined on not ending this war because they're winning, and they're going to retake all of their ground eventually. And so with those two things in mind, although the Russian army is not an immovable object, the Ukrainians are an unstoppable force ideologically, meeting a Russian, at least at the very top levels of the government, a movable object. And so and while the Ukrainian army is an unstoppable force and the Russians are just getting pushed aside, ideologically, neither side is willing to budge. And so I think the Ukrainians will most likely end up pushing the Russians almost entirely out of Ukraine by the spring of next year. And by that point, the Russians will most likely try and declare a ceasefire, which the Ukrainians will agree to try and get into diplomatic negotiations. The diplomatic negotiations will go on for some while, eventually fizzle out, and this war will have never officially ended, but there will be a ceasefire in place, practically stopping the war indefinitely. I think that's most likely the direction this is going to go in. Take it with a grain of salt, though, because, once again, there's no real way to know that. And I can't crystal ball everything. And that's one thing I say a lot, is that there's no way to crystal ball this stuff, and there's no way to know how this will end. For example, tomorrow, the Russians could launch a tactical nuke into Kyiv. And while I've said that will probably never happen, what if Putin just woke up in an hour or two and just went, you know what, I want World War III, and just pushed a button? It could happen. And there's really no way to know where anything will really go. We can only go off of what seems logical and reasonable. And I think at this point, with the way this war is going, I think that's going to be the most logical end result at this point. But take it with a grain of salt, because that end result could change with time. And a lot of things could happen in between now and the spring, but I definitely don't see this ending by Christmas. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And also, Sniper Duel said, stop being scared. Now, I'm not scared. I don't know who's scared, but with that, we are now going to be moving out of this question segment and into our next segment of news. And so returning back to our location unknowns, which we have 3 left, and some of these are really interesting. The first one, we can see that a Russian Typhoon armored truck was destroyed. I like how they call this thing a Typhoon, Matthew, because it looks like this thing got ripped up in a typhoon.
Right.
Looking in the inside there, wow, wait a minute, hang on, those are actually luxurious seats. They even got little, like, the side headrest things to keep your head upright. Like, that's actually kind of nice. But let's say the Russians won't be using that truck anymore. When you see the Z clearly painted on the side. You see one of the bulletproof windows took a pretty solid hit. It looks like one of the bulletproof windows has been de-bulletproofed. I don't know about you, Matthew, but I think if someone shot through that window, it would pass through since there's no window.
I mean, it could, but it might not.
Listen, everyone, this is just I'm not an expert at anything. Well, I don't know. I don't know if I qualify as an expert because I've been doing this for so long. I don't really know. I don't qualify myself as an expert. But I think it's easy enough to say, without any leeway of doubt, that this probably is no longer bulletproof. Let me know in the chat what y'all think, but I don't think this can be used by the Russians anymore. Now see him coming over to the open door, where they're now looking into the driver's seat, and I just don't think that this is going to keep on running. I don't think the Russians will use this anymore, and considering that this Ukrainian is standing around looking at it, I don't think they'll have the chance to try. And you also see the engine bay in there, apparently. And also some notebooks on the ground where the Russians were trying to take notes on how not to suck, and then they ended up doing that anyways. And so with that, we are now going to be moving on into the next bit of Location Unknown news, and this one has probably been long awaited. We haven't covered the casualty reports in quite some while on this channel, but tonight is the night, guys. It is going to happen, my friends. And so with that, let's take a look at the Russian losses, my friends. And it's taking a second to load, my friends, but we can see, 64,700 Russians dead. That's not good. I don't think anyone could say that that's a good number. In fact, that might be the worst one seen in a modern war yet. Let's go and check Gulf War, which I think it would be about the highest casualty war in modern history of, I guess you could say, of note in between a large power and a smaller one. Of course, this is counting out like the Sudanese Civil War that ended up killing 2 million or so. But going on down here, oh my god. The Russians are doing worse than the Iraqis did during the Gulf War now in terms of casualties.
Is that even possible?
It apparently is. I mean, like on the high end of the estimate. Also, everyone keep a note of this because this casualty report is probably as accurate as it can get, but there's still a massive amount of leeway because even with us winning the Gulf War, we don't really know how many casualties the Iraqis really took. It's somewhere in between 20,000 to 50,000. So it could be any guess in between those two numbers could be accurate. It could be completely correct, but we don't really know. But on the high end, the Russians are now an entire 15,000 dead over the amount of losses that the Iraqis took in the Gulf War, which tells you how badly they're really doing. It's not good, and they've lost another 400 today. So almost another half BTG has been lost over the past 24 hours. Moving on down to the tanks, 2,500 Russian tanks have been knocked out. Once again, not a good number. Also, just to remind everyone, because I just clicked my heater, if you hear a little beeping sound in the stream, that is not y'all going crazy and the voices inside your head telling you that there's like people on the walls or something. That's my heater that's making that beeping noise. Sorry about that, but there is no air conditioning or heater inside of my room. So I got to control it with a fan and a little space heater below my legs. But anyways, we can see 2,500 tanks have been knocked out, an additional 3 today. Not an exorbitantly high number, but I think the rest of the days in this war have accounted for that quite well, bringing the number up to 2,500. When you see that 5,179 armored personnel carriers have been destroyed, an exorbitantly high number, considering that the Russian army armor numbers. Let's see if we can get some numbers here on paper. on paper, of what the Russians had before the war. So let's see. I think we're getting close to the armored personnel category. Yep, we are. All right. So, ooh. Okay, so, man, wait a minute, Matthew. Interestingly enough, we found out where all the numbers are. So the Russians have these massive numbers on paper because they have 7,000 BMP-1s in reserve, in like supply yards just rotting away. So that's why the Russians have such a high number of APCs. But if we go through here and we look at all of these, we can see that they had 470 plus 29, well, really 3,000. So 3,500. So let's see, 3,500, about 4,000, 5,100. And according to these losses, they've lost nearly all of the APCs that they would have had going into this war, and now they've had to start pulling out the reserve BMP-2s and BMP-1s to try and fill in their armored force, so that way it isn't suffering as badly. And of course, these APC numbers could be including their Concords. They could also be including their extensive arsenal of Sturms, which are MTLBs with Sturm missiles attached on top. They could also be including their Chrysanthemas. We have seen a couple of those destroyed. Some of their Cornets, which just kind of look like another version of the Chrysanthema. They could also be including the Cornet Ds, which apparently aren't even in service, and it just looks like a Tiger armored car with some Cornets on top. And they could also be including a couple of other things, like their BRDMs, which they have 1,000 of, and then another 1,000 in reserve. Their MTLBs, which they just have countless thousands of. Their BTR-60s, their BTR-70s, their BTR-80s, their BTR-90s, which they have a very small amount of. They could be including all of these things, pretty much, inside of this armored personnel carrier number. But one thing's for certain, they're starting to run out of them, and they probably don't have a lot left, based off of the Wikipedia numbers, which I know someone's about to say, Wikipedia is not reliable. This is honestly about as reliable as you can get in a short amount of time trying to pull this up on stream. So sorry about that, but that's what we have to go with. I cannot go buy a book from Amazon, have it overnight shipped to me in 2 minutes, and then read the whole, like, 400-page book in 30 seconds to give you all an answer, sadly. So this is about the best it can get. But they're running out of APCs, suffice it to say. And based off of the tank numbers, and with these numbers in mind, we can see that they have a very small amount of pretty much all of their tanks active. And also we see that around 600 T-62s have been withdrawn from storage. But starting off the war, let's not go into the rabbit holes here real quick. We're just going to go with their pre-war numbers, what they would have gone into this war with. 2,030 plus 480, so around 2,500, 3,000. So out of the 3,000 tanks that they probably started out this war with, they have now lost 2,500 of them. So now there's only about 500 T-72s, T-90s, and T-80s that are left, unless they start pulling them out of reserve, which we have seen them doing, and we've also seen them pull out a large amount of T-62Ms, like we see right here. And so it looks like they're going to start running out of armor pretty soon, or they lost all of the armor that they started the war with. And so with that, let's go back here. 1,582 artillery units. Do we get any numbers on the artillery units? I'm sure Matthew's going to sleep over there right now. I'm sorry, Matthew, but this is...
I'm not sleeping. I'm going 100 miles an hour over here.
he's very quiet because he's probably trying to look through the live chat and keep it sorted and running. Also, just got a reminder to complete a midterm that I actually already completed today, which is good. At least did that. But
I about had a heart attack for you.
Yeah, I saw that, and I actually did have a little bit of PTSD. I was like, ah! And then I was like, oh, thank God I did that this morning. But anyways, scrolling on, we're trying to find the artillery. Artillery? Look at all the future vehicles they have planned. That probably won't happen now. Also, that is stupid looking. Like, it's misproportioned. I don't know about you, Matthew, but that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
It does look kind of stupid. It's like, I'm trying to figure out what looks so... I think it's the headlights are like so far spaced apart and so small for a big vehicle. It makes it look really stupid.
Yeah, and you know another thing? This turret up here looks all modern and angular and stuff, but you can actually see the round BMP-2 turret that is that turret. It's literally a BMP-2M. You can even see the muzzle brake of that thing. Well, hang on. Let me show you that, Matthew. BMP-2M. And if I have to, I'll use like a War Thunder picture of it if I have to. But here we go. See that muzzle brake right there on that BMP-2? like the distinct shape of it, the shape of the barrel, and also how
Yes.
there's these ATGM launchers on the side. If we go back to that picture, same barrel, they covered it with like a square metal shroud to make it look modern. Same ATGM launchers, and you can even see the curvature of the BMP-2 turret under that welded-on angular armor. So they're trying to make this thing look modern by welding on some really angular-looking cool stuff, but under it, it's still a Cold War vehicle that just looks new.
Yes, it definitely doesn't look good. I'll say that.
Yeah, and it just looks awful, honestly. But with that, let's move on up to the artillery real quick, and we're going to try and move on as fast as we can after we look at the artillery. Come on, where's the artillery? Come on, come on. We need the artillery. Where is the artillery? Oh, okay, wait a minute, hang on. We're not doing MLRSs this time. We're just doing the towed artillery units. So let's keep moving. Let's keep moving. So according to these numbers on Wikipedia, it looks like 1,582. So there's 290 of these, 191 of those. Let me add these up real quick. Hang on, everyone. It's time for me to start doing a little bit of number crunching. So 100 Nonas, 900 D30s, 526, 2 A49s, which I don't even think I've really seen a lot, plus the Gyansons, which are around 191, plus the Mr. Bs, which they have 290 of. So they have 2,007 pre-war artillery pieces that were operational that did not have to be pulled out of reserves, and we can see that according to these numbers, they've lost nearly 75% of their pre-war active artillery pieces. And so you can start to see that these casualty numbers in almost all categories are starting to get up towards the 75% range of their operational units pre-war. They're not going to last much longer. I can promise y'all that. That's a certainty. And so with that, you can see the other casualty figures. Of course, they've almost lost 100% of their pre-war logistics force, 3,951 vehicles out of 4,000. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from the casualty report, and we're now going to be moving on into the next bit of news, where we can see a low-flying Ukrainian helicopter, a really cool video, because we get to see a low-flying Ukrainian helicopter, and it has no music. Is that nice or what? And so here's a video with raw sound of an Mi-24 roaring over the fields of southern Ukraine. We're supposing. And so that,
Wow, that's impressive. It's like feels like you're actually sitting in it.
yeah, it's, you know, I think it would be really cool, and I think this would be a huge publicity stunt for the Ukrainians, is if they took one of these Mi-24s and they put one of those Google kind of like VR headset camera things inside of the front gunner seat and just flew it somewhere well behind the line, so that way you could get that kind of idea. You know, they could say, sit down and have the experience of a Ukrainian helicopter gunner. I think that would be a pretty viral thing for a lot of people around the world and keep attention on the war.
Enforcer, what if they actually like put the GoPro in the helicopter and then they live streamed?
Oh no,
what was going on?
they could get
That
stream
would be-
sniped.
Yeah, also that'd be a bad OPSEC problem too. But if it wasn't for OPSEC, that would be really cool.
That would be really cool. But then again, you know, there could be a Russian out there. They could get like a couple of trucks blown away by some unguided rockets. They're like, who hit that? It is Vasily Pachenko Twitter. Pull up his Twitter, quick! And they pull it up. They stream snipe the poor guy. So I think,
Or they could live stream the drone footage and just like start it instantly, and the Russians are like, "Oh, look, it's a live stream," and then they see themselves in the picture, and they're like, "Oh," and then they blow up.
yeah, that's a pretty good one. And so with that, that's the end of the video, but still a really nice video to see. And once again, great to have no music in it, so we can hear the raw sound of what it really looks and sounds like to be inside the gunner's seat of an Mi-24. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the location unknowns and further down the line towards the area near Svatove. And while I am saying that there hasn't been a lot of frontline movement, this frontline has been moving slowly from what we've been able to tell and what we found, and it is marching on its way towards Svatove. That's a definite guarantee at this point. And so with that, we can see a Russian wisely deciding to surrender before the Ukrainians begin the battle, probably the very quickly fought battle for Svatove. Here's one of the Russians running towards the Ukrainians to surrender. We hear an artillery shell land, and they're yelling for him to run over. Now also they're yelling for him to stop.
Давай, гусь ебаный.
And with that, that's the end of the video. It's very interesting to see that this Ukrainian unit that's continuing its advance throughout this area of Ukraine and retaking ground is having to deal with a surrendering Russian. You can see, Matthew, at the beginning, like when this video started, like these Ukrainians are all just sitting around like, what? You know, they just watch this guy run up like, well, this isn't in the manual. Like, look at this guy. He looks over like, what? What is this? And then we hear some kind of mortar round and fall, and this guy's like, oh, yeah. Like, he just says it so calmly, you know, like they're under mortar fire again. He's like, oh, crap. So, with that, very interesting to see. And it's good to know that the Russians are so demoralized at this point that they are actually running towards Ukrainian lines to surrender. That guy wasn't encircled or anything. He just ran over from his position to surrender. And so with that, we're going to be moving on to the next clip near the area of Svatove, where we also saw that the 57th Brigade was hitting the Russians as well in this area. Also, we're going to have to mute that. When we see the drone here looking at the tank, and we all know what's about to happen, the tank gets hit, it goes up in a ball of flame. We now see another T-72 being hit on the rear, on the engine bay, a decent amount of black smoke showing that that engine has definitely been knocked out. And so with that, that's the end of the video, and once again, really nice to see the 57th is helping out and pushing towards the town of Svatove. And so with that, we're going to be moving out of this area in the northeast. The front line here is making a slow, rolling advance each day. It's not as fast and lightning quick as we saw in the opening days of these offensives near Balaklia, but it is still moving at a surefire pace, and they are making ground that is invaluable and saving many Ukrainians from a terrible fate at Russian hands. Moving even further on down the front lines towards the area of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, we saw that the Russians had brought them out again for propaganda reasons. Introducing the 240mm Chilpan, which they brought out a million times for propaganda reasons. If y'all remember, the idiots, the last time they uploaded a video of one of these things, they showed it exactly where it was on the front lines. We showed it on the news, and then about 2 hours later, the thing was destroyed right where it was sitting in the video. So I hope they did the same thing again with this one. And also, notice, the side of this thing is rusting. That's how poorly kept this thing is. You can clearly see the rust in the paint chipping off of it. And now I see them flipping the mortar up. And now firing it. You know, Matthew, you know how normal mortars, you have to hang the round over the barrel and then drop it?
Yes.
They must have like Paul Bunyan out here loading this 240mm Tulpan. With my double-bladed axe and my hobnail boots, I go where the mortar's tall. Or something like that. But
how do you remember that tune, by the way?
I don't know. Disney's already coming. Their lawyers are on their way to their house right now. But I don't know. I just remember it because Paul Bunyan as like as one of those folk hero legends. Honestly, all of the American folk hero legends from that little animated series, if y'all watched it, stuck out to me, like Casey Jones and Johnny Appleseed and Paul Bunyan. They were all really cool stories. I liked them a lot. But anyways, I just remember that song. And I just gotta say, I mean, I know that this thing is probably loaded from the bottom because there's no way feasibly that you could load this thing from the top. It would be logistically impossible. There's no way to do that. But still, it's a funny thought. And so with that, we are going to be moving on to the next clip of news outside of Severodonetsk. But once again, the Russians, whenever they're desperate for a little bit of a propaganda coup, they always bring out those goofy-looking Tulpans. Moving on down to Soledar, however, we did see that the Ukrainians were sitting in a trench in the area around Bakhmut. And it looks like World War I out here. And I don't know what kind of music that is. Singing Kumbaya or something like that. But we can see that mortar fire is falling in the distance, and this is literally the Somme. I mean, like, if there was anything that looked like World War I, is this exact spot in the front lines. Like, right here, Let me pull this up. I gotta pull it up. Some battlefield. Images. Let me go through and try and find it for y'all real quick. Also, here's a picture of before and after. This is the picture from 1916, and this is the landscape as it is now, which is kind of really weird to see that you can just go to those places in France, and it was a massive battlefield. But anyways, moving on from that, here's a picture from the Somme back then. You can see some French soldiers right there, actually, which is kind of rare. The Somme was known as a major British offensive, although there were some French units involved, and we can see some in this picture. But take a look at that, Matthew, and then take a look at that. 100 years has gone by, and wars will almost look the exact same. Trench warfare and all, massive bombardments and barrages, uprooting the soil, completely removing any kind of grass or vegetation and life from the trees, and it's almost the exact same thing 100 years later. And it's really...
And what do people always say? They always say, I wonder how the war will look 100 years from now. Well, guess what? It's almost identical.
Yeah, it'll almost look like this. And if we go back even further...
Although I will say, we aren't using muskets anymore, but we're still using guns that are just a little bit more advanced.
One thing I have to say is that war changes a lot technologically, strategically, and tactically, but in the actual look of war, how a war ends up looking, there's not a lot of massive differences. It almost always will end up looking the same in certain situations. And if I can find y'all a picture here, which I think I might be able to, I will show y'all a picture from the Civil War right here of the Battle of the Crater. And if y'all know anything about the Battle of Petersburg, south of Richmond, the Union actually blew up this massive explosion south of Petersburg that left this huge crater. It's still there to this day. If I can find it on Google Maps, I'll show it to y'all as a small rabbit hole. And this story was quite wild. So it's in Petersburg. Let me try and find the crater. The crater is around this highway somewhere, I believe. One of the interstates. Taylor House Kitchen. There it is, the crater. This is the crater. The Union blew up a well, actually, yes, it was the Union. The Union blew up a massive, pretty much charge under Confederate trenches. The Ukrainians were not fighting that war at that time. That's a couple of hundred years before now. But they blew up a massive crater, causing hundreds of Confederate soldiers to get killed immediately. And then the Union did something that was tactically inept. They told all of these units to charge into the crater, and so they all went running down into the crater, and this crater was so deep that I believe it was almost 3 battalions of Union soldiers got stuck inside of this crater, and the Confederates just crowded around the sides of the thing and just started shooting down into it. It was like a fish in a barrel shoot. So they ended up killing hundreds of Union soldiers. That specific battle, the Battle of the Crater, ended up being a Union defeat. Almost when Union defeat at that point in the war was not heard of, and it was due to the poor decision of charging the men into the crater instead of around it when they were ordered to move around the crater, but for some reason that order was misunderstood or not followed, and they told them all to go into the crater. It was a very interesting story from Civil War history, but if you look at that picture, look at this one from the Somme, and then this picture from Ukraine now, war doesn't change. It really doesn't. Over 150 years, from war to war, the look of war is going to be almost the same, and it's really just bizarre to think that hundreds of years of advancement technologically, socially, culturally, things will still look the same. And for some reason, we always think that war has come so far, yet the experience for the average infantryman will almost look the same as it did 150 years ago or 100 years ago. And so with that, we are now going to be moving on into the next bit of news. Once again, a very interesting look at the front lines around Bakhmut, and on down towards the actual city of Bakhmut, where we saw the Ukrainians using one of the older D-20s. The Russians also use these. They're quite old, but they're in heavy use and in high numbers on both sides, and we can see one of them being used here. We now see them loading the D-20. We can see them firing this D-20. And while this gun is quite an old one, interestingly enough, both sides used them to fairly good effect. While the Russia, and this is one thing I have to say, I always give the Ukrainians the benefit of the doubt when they're using older weapons because they are, on paper, a poorer country than Russia and also do not spend as much on their military as the Russians do. And so they usually get a pass for using older equipment because it's to be expected. And they never prided themselves pre-war on being the best military in the world. The Russians did. And so usually they get a bad time. And I say, look at how pathetic it is that they're using an old weapon while the Ukrainians get a pass, due to that kind of, I guess you could say, circumstance that was around before the war. And so with that, we're going to be moving out of the Bakhmut area, but it's good to see that the Ukrainians are still holding the line in this area, repelling Russian advances, and also using their artillery to great effect to support the infantry that are continuing to fight and hold that ground in the area of Soledar and also right on the outskirts of Bakhmut. Moving further on down and towards the southern front, because once again, no news from the Donetsk area whatsoever. It appears that this front line has almost fallen completely stagnant and static over the past few weeks, as there's been no news to report. But in the area of Volodar, we have seen that the 63rd Brigade continues to hit the Russians today as well, striking some fairly effective hits. And so, here's the video. We see one Russian vehicle right there, and now you can see one less Russian vehicle right there. We now see it smoking. And we now see another BMP in a dugout, and another BMP get struck by artillery. So with that, it's nice to see that 63rd Brigade is inflicting casualties on the Russians in their own dugouts where they least expect it. But of course, Ukrainian artillery never misses, and just because you put your vehicle in a couple of foot deep hole, that just means that you're already putting your tank in an early grave. With that, we're going to be moving into the next clip where we can see that the 63rd Brigade also used a Stugna today. Now that's rock music, and we can see the missile on its way, hitting the vehicle and causing a nice little fire. We can see it right there. And so with that, that's the end of the video, but it's nice to see. It's real nice to see that the 63rd Brigade is really starting to make its name for itself. It used to be that the Fighting 93rd was the one on the front lines that was carrying everything, and then they got moved from Balaklia down towards the Soledar and Bakhmut area, and it seems like the news of their unit and their bravery has kind of fallen off a little bit in terms of video and picture evidence, but it now looks like the 63rd is taking their place and making a name for themselves in combat footage videos. Moving further on down the line towards the area of Kuilapol, we saw that another Russian tank was destroyed today, courtesy of the 83rd Brigade. We can see here the drone dropping the bomblet onto the Russian vehicle. It appears to probably be a BMP, hitting the sign of it and causing a nice little explosion. We can now see a second bomblet being dropped, because one isn't enough. We can see that this one hit the front glacis of what appears to be this BMP, most likely knocking out its engine. We now see a third bomblet being dropped, also hitting in a very similar spot of the vehicle. I think we're about to see a fourth bomblet dropped. You now see the drone looking around.
That's a very strange drone interface.
It really is. We now see it dropping another bomblet, this time onto a Russian vehicle right there. A direct hit to the center. It looks like that vehicle may have caught on fire, although it's incredibly hard to tell with the camera quality. I can't really tell y'all if that thing is burning or not. It looks like it is burning. But once again, I'm not entirely sure while we hear the occasional sputter of Matthew's microphone letting us listen to the air in his office, which sounds quite nice, actually. It's like it's like one of those things, those suction things, Matthew, that they use at the dentist office, you know, the things. It sounds like that. But anyways.
You hear that coming from my mic?
Yeah, like just for a split second there near the end of that little clip, I heard,
oh.
And I was like, I was like, that's weird. Anyways, with that, we're going to be moving out of the area of Kuilapol, which, for some reason, I don't know about y'all, maybe it's because I'm pronouncing it wrong, but it reminds me of when Stewie on Family Guy says "Kuhwip." Like, for some reason, Quilipo almost has to require the same enunciation with how I'm having to say it. So with that, we're going to be moving on to Kuhwip, and we're going to be moving towards the town of Komishuvaka, where we saw that a SAM intercepted a Russian missile today. Just in case if you are new to the whole war scene, a SAM is a surface-to-air missile, meaning that a vehicle carrying a missile on the ground fires it into the air to shoot something down. It could be a plane, it could be a drone, a helicopter, anything. As long as it's flying and in the sky, it can shoot it down.
Yeah.
You see the night sky being lit up by this missile as it now flies on its way towards the drone, and also a cloud. When you see it still flying on its way, it's going to be hard to miss that in the night sky. And it got it.
Yeah.
That was a meaty yeah. That guy sounded like he just heard, that guy just sounded like he saw a touchdown. He went, yeah.
Yeah.
That doesn't even sound Ukrainian. That guy sounds like American.
He sounded like he said, yeah.
When you go to Burger Store and they have 50% discount on double junior burger because it's American.
Yeah.
Yes.
Would you like fries with that, sir?
Yeah.
Oh no, that can be turned into a meme.
Hello, is this John?
Yeah.
Oh man, I like it. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from this clip, but it's nice to see that the Ukrainians are using their surface-to-air missile systems to shoot down Russian air targets over the area. Of course, luckily, we haven't heard any news from Zaporizhia or Dnipro of further missile attacks today, although those may just be absent of videos. We're not entirely sure, but it seems like the front line in the south, although picking up in action, is not resulting in any frontline changes, and so it does appear that this front line is still remaining stagnant and unchanged. However, the same cannot be said for the area in Kherson. It looks like the Ukrainians are on the move again, and that always makes the Russians fear, because there's really nothing they can do to stop that at this point. Starting off in the area of Mobilization, and of course, before we move through this area, I always have to let everyone know that we are not giving away any operational security, I guess you could say, breaches by these markers. These markers are made inaccurate. We sometimes are able to tell where these are, and sometimes we see where they are, but we make sure to put them in areas where they are not, so that way it does not give away exactly where these units are. So while I'm saying that this is a marker in Molove, it could be really anywhere in the Kherson Oblast. So starting off, we can see an Excalibur round hitting the Russians. We can also hear some Eurobeat techno music as the Ukrainians are obliterating these poor Russians. Whoa! Whoa!
Wow.
Whoa! Gosh.
Why was the fireball that big?
I have no idea, but that was a massive explosion. Look at all the shrapnel that went flying out across those fields. Oh my gosh. If a farmer tries to till up that field, he's going to have to buy a brand new plow because there's just going to be so much metal in those fields. Someone said the beeping continues. I'm sorry, it's my space heater. And you see the mushroom cloud flying up into the sky, and it's near some lake.
Dang. That was a serious explosion.
That was serious. And meanwhile, downrange, someone's going, I think we got him, as they're watching the mushroom cloud literally float up like 15 miles away. You know, that must be neat when you're in the artillery and explosion is that size, and you can probably hear, like, the target you were shooting at actually blow up from miles away. I wonder if they can actually hear that, or if they're deaf from firing the gun, so they really can't. But
they're probably deaf, to be totally honest.
Yeah, they're probably like, fire! And that's what they hear for the next 15 minutes is just that whining tinnitus noise that you get. So with that, we're now going to be moving on into our next clip of news from the Kherson area. Moving further back behind the lines, where we can see that multiple Russian missiles, due to their poor quality and most likely being pulled out of reserve, have misfired. Here's the video. Uh-oh. That one didn't work. Maybe the second one will work. So we see that they let the first firework go, and we finally hear the report from it. Honestly, not my favorite, but they're now throwing up a second firework. This one's swishing around and doing a little bit of a spin. Very elaborate firework, I have to say. It's now just sitting there in the night sky. Wait, was that... Wait, let's listen to that again.
Yeah, did you hear that?
The biggest fart confirmed. The Russians are far...
Sounded like an EM or something like that.
We now see it slowly making its way back towards the ground. And it's slowly fading out. Now it's falling like a rock, it seems. Two Russian missile launches, 2 Russian missile fails. Gotta say, Russians stay winning. And so with that, we're going to be moving on to the next clip of news from the front line in the area of Novokuban, where we saw today that there was a destroyed T-62 on the front lines, which is not surprising. But still nice to see. Uh-oh. The Russians lost their 60-year-old piece of junk. Oh, no. That thing is charred. They would call that well done in the restaurant industry.
The Russians use their tanks like, like plastic cutlery. It's like disposable. They just use it and then throw it out.
It's got the same quality as the cutlery used in a Marco Pierre White restaurant. Westwan. We're hunting wabbits out here. And so with that, that's the end of the video, but oh man, the Russians have lost another piece of junk. And that's seriously a big deal for them at this point. I'm not even saying that sarcastically. That's all they have left. And so losing these pieces of garbage is a huge deal for them. They can't get these things back. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from this well-done T-62. We're going to be moving into the next clip, where you see the Russians trying to regroup. And according to the caption, trying to push some kind of offensive. Our handsome men went there. Let me make sure I read this caption correctly. Alright, so what we're watching is the Ukrainians advancing and attacking a town. We don't know what town this is. When you see one of the armored personnel carriers has made it into the tree line. We see the Russians literally lagging it. Just legging it across the field. They're like, run away. Infantry runs.
Man, he's got the Gucci DJI controller too.
Yeah, I know. He's got the real deal.
Oh, he's got the little small one. Oh man, he didn't get lucky and use the big one.
We now see the Ukrainian armored personnel carriers advancing through the tree line. I guess you could say really more like the house line. We can see more Ukrainian units advancing. Quite a large number of Ukrainian vehicles making this push. We now see some Russian artillery, it appears, trying to land around the vehicles. They're now returning fire, the Ukrainians are, at the Russians. Make a decision, man. No, it won't work here. Take care of the drone. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm voice acting for no reason. But we can see that the Ukrainian forces continue to advance into this village, and it appears that the Russians are in full retreat at the moment. We can see the Russians still on the run. They are literally running nonstop through this town. They've begun the 10K marathon. Gosh, there's a lot of them. There's like 25, 30 of them in this one group. We now see the Ukrainian armor is still moving into the town. We see the Russians in the center of town. It looks like some... Actually, that was, I can't really tell, some kind of a grad battery that's firing into the town. And it appears that the Russians are rushing in armored vehicles to try and assist their collapsing infantry lines that are inside of this village. When you see two vehicles literally speeding into the town. So there was one tank and a Typhoon armored truck. We can now see the Typhoon armored truck, the Russian tank advancing forward, the Russian infantry running around in circles. The Russian tank is moving down the road on its own, without any support from infantry. We now see the Typhoon following it as well. That Typhoon is so stupid looking. Look how big it is. I mean, it's literally just a moving box-sized target. And with that, that's the end of the video. We sadly don't get to see if the Russians got obliterated. Considering that they were almost outnumbered 5-1 in terms of armored vehicles, I feel like they probably did get obliterated, but sadly, we didn't get to see that. Still, it's great to see that the Ukrainians are continuing their advance in the Kherson area, and it looks like they're literally putting the Russians on the run. As soon as the Russians see Ukrainian armed forces, they turn around and just hightail it out of there. We saw almost 30 guys do that. With that, we're now going to be moving further down the line and into the next segment where we saw some more destroyed Russian vehicles in the Kherson area. And actually, this appears to be a marker that we were able to identify where it came from. Or I think we just showed this a second ago. Hang on. Yeah, we did. We did. For some reason, I have a duplicate. And you can see that these markers are not accurate at all because they put the same duplicate in two different places. So once again, we're trying to make sure that OPSEC is insured, and also that was a little bit of a gaffe on my part to put the same clip twice, so sorry about that. But we're now going to be moving down to our last bit of news near the town of Oleksandrivka, where we saw that the Ukrainians are continuing to advance on Kherson. We can also see them put the watermelon there in the title, letting us know about those delicious Kherson watermelons once again. We can also hear the trap remix music already starting in this video, and so we'll have to mute it. When we see this Ukrainian soldier sitting on the front of a Ukrainian tank as it advances down the road, quite merrily, on its way towards Kherson. A lot of destroyed Russian vehicles. It's almost like they're losing a war. But what do I know? The Russians keep on telling me that they're winning, so I ought to believe them. We can also see what appeared to have been a disabled Ukrainian BMP-2 right there, showing that there may have been a little bit of a fierce fight before this guy even got here on this tank. And so with that, it's nice to see that the Ukrainian units are continuing to advance in the southern front, but sadly, we don't have any idea of what this advance entails or where they're going. We also wouldn't disclose that probably until tomorrow due to operational security reasons, but it is nice to see. And so with that, believe it or not, we have covered all of the news from around the world and inside of Ukraine today, and so it's now time to go all the way up to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy on day 235 of the war. And so without further ado, here's the speech from the one, the only, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Let's give him a round of applause, and also let me make sure that I can get these subtitles right up there. And so here's the video.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Маємо новий пакет оборонної допомоги від Сполучених Штатів Америки обсягом $725 мільйонів. Це дуже потрібні речі: боєприпаси для хаймерсів та артилерії, протитанкова зброя, протирадарні ракети. Дякую президенту Байдену, обом партіям, Конгресу і усьому народу США за цей сильний пакет. Ми робимо все, щоб знизити можливості окупантів, здатність російської армії нести терор по українській землі. Послідовно знищуємо логістику терористів, їхні склади і штаби. Загальні втрати ворога тільки убитими вже наближаються до 65 тисяч. Стільки громадян Росії віддали своє життя за можливість купки людей у Кремлі ігнорувати реальність. І по тому, як триває російська могилізація, можна сказати, що і 100 тисяч загиблих громадян Росії не спонукатимуть Кремль про щось задуматись. Тільки реальні перемоги України, тільки реальний захист вільним світом самого себе від російського терору і шантажу, захист санкціями, захист допомогою Україні, тільки повне витіснення окупантів з української землі і демонтаж агресивних можливостей держави-терориста – все це шлях до миру. Мир стане можливим тоді, коли для Росії стане неможливим її терор. Цієї та минулої доби різні регіони нашої держави зазнали російських атак, зокрема ракетами та іранськими дронами. Частину ракет і дронів збито. Але, на жаль, не всі. На жаль, є руйнування та жертви. Донбас, Запоріжжя, Миколаївщина, Харківщина, Сумщина, Київщина, Дніпропетровщина та деякі інші області нашої країни. Ми робимо все, щоб збивати більше ворожих ракет і дронів, щоб знешкоджувати більше ударних позицій російської армії. І обов'язково настане той день, коли наша держава зможе виконувати це завдання на 100%. Я хочу сьогодні знов подякувати усім нашим людям, які оперативно ліквідовують наслідки російських терористичних ударів, нашим енергетикам, працівникам ДСНС, комунальних служб та місцевої влади, нашим будівельникам, працівникам Національної поліції, урядовцям, які координують процес відновлення. Хоча у деяких наших містах і районах енергетики ще змушені за графіком обмежувати постачання електрики для збереження стабільності системи, ми робимо і зробимо все, щоб відновити технічні можливості для постачання. Також у звільнених районах на Харківщині, на Херсонщині, на Донеччині, у Лимані, у Святогірську працюємо над поверненням порядку, соціальних і медичних послуг, енергопостачання, зв'язку, пошти, водопостачання, газу, де це можливо. Наприклад, почали повертати газопостачання в Ізюм. Перші 500 родин міста вже знов мають в оселях газ. Тільки завчора підключено до газопостачання понад 3000 будинків в Ізюмському, Куп'янському, Чугуївському та Харківському районах Харківської області. Тривають роботи і на інших напрямках. Я дякую кожному і кожній, хто повертає українцям нормальне життя. Продовжуються активні дії на різних ділянках фронту. Дуже тяжка ситуація зберігається на Донеччині і Луганщині. Найважче – Бахмутський напрямок, як і в попередні дні, тримаємо позиції. Загалом на Сході і на Півдні робимо все, щоб окупанти відчували – у них немає перспектив. Кого б вони не кинули воювати проти нас, це для них завершиться тільки поразкою. Ну, а гражданам России, кто не хочет участвовать в этой преступной войне, но кого отправляют на войну, я еще раз напомню об одной возможности. Все, кто сдается в украинский плен, сохраняют свою жизнь. Все, кто продолжает воевать в российской армии или среди наемников, такой возможности не имеют. Україна обов'язково поверне усе своє. Вічна слава усім, хто воює за нашу державу. Вічна шана кожному і кожній, хто допомагає нам долати російський терор. Вічна вдячність усім, хто працює на нашу перемогу. Слава Україні!
And so with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy here on day 235 of the war, and that also wraps out our news summary for today. I thank you all so much for watching the news. If you did enjoy this segment, before we move on into the question segment, please make sure to subscribe, because these streams run every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, except for Mondays. We take Mondays off but every other day of the week. You can find this streaming right here at this exact time. We were the first to stream at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, and we will always be the ones to stream at exactly this time, covering the war every single day. And so thank you all so much once again for watching, and we're now about to start moving into the question segment, where we're going to address all of the questions that have been sent in over Super Chat and as many live chats as we can, and also address our polls. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, folks, and yeah, we are into our final question segment, and we have 3 polls to address. The first one says, how would you describe Putin's decision-making process? Choose the best option. It looks like 3% said logical/rational, 45% said emotional and rational, 29% said calculated and cold, and 22% said none of the above. Now, on this one, I would have to fall within the calculated and cold category, although there is definitely an element of irrational decision-making here, because it made no sense at all to go and invade Ukraine. I don't understand why he did it, and I'm not sure if we ever will. But Enforcer, what do you think?
I would have to say that I honestly think he's working at a rational and emotional level, because launching missile attacks into Ukraine for losing an offensive or a war or losing a bridge or anything similar, that's all on an emotional level. It doesn't even make any sense to do that in retaliation, attacking the citizenry, because it doesn't benefit the war effort at all for the Russians. So I would have to say, certainly would be that he's working on more of an emotional or an irrational level at this point. And so with that, I hope that does address the poll fairly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right. And next up, the second poll says, from a neutral perspective, do you believe Putin has a mental disorder? It looks like 51% said yes, he is a psycho or sociopath. 90% said I'm not sure. 18% said no, he is sane and calculating. And 22% said a mixture of option 1 and 3. Now, I think that in the past, totally honest take, I think he was sane and calculating in the past, but I think something has started to happen recently. I'm not sure if it's old age or what, but I think he is developing some kind of mental disorder, because his actions to me don't seem to make any sense, and it seems like something that somebody with a mental issue might do. But Enforcer, what do you think?
I would have to say, in my opinion, I think back in the day, it seemed like he was a lot more calculating than he is now. I would have to say that at this point, there's definitely, like you said, there's definitely something wrong with him, because, you know, this is not the Putin that everyone knew in 2008 and 2014 during the original Donbass conflict and during the war with Georgia, and also during the Second Chechen War. That's not that Putin. This Putin has gone completely off the rails. He doesn't seem like that cold, nonchalant, cool KGB guy that everyone in the world was trying to portray. Even the West portrayed him as that. You know, he's all, you know, like if you were on one side, it was like the evil, but he was the evil, cunning guy from Russia. Or, you know, if you're on another side, he was the cool, cunning guy from Russia. Now everyone calls him an idiot, you know, regardless. But he doesn't seem cool or cunning anymore. He just seems off the rails, unhinged, and unintelligent at this point. Nothing he does makes any logical sense. And so with that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right. And the third and final poll of the final segment of questions says, what do you think of Elon Musk deciding today to keep funding Starlink for Ukraine? It looks like 15% said, well, excuse me, let me start from the top, actually. It makes more sense this way. 66% said he is trying to save face. 8% said he recently found the funding. 11% said he decided to be generous. And 15% said none of the above. Now, for me, it is very clearly option 1. He is trying to save face. It looked like he got some backlash on Twitter and social media for doing what he was going to do, which was cut it. But he decided to keep funding it. So we may never know exactly why he decided to do that, but it seems to me that he's trying to save face. Enforcer, what do you think?
One second, we're going to try and pull up something here about Tesla and SpaceX stocks. Is SpaceX a publicly traded company yet?
I'll be totally honest, I can't remember. I don't think it is.
I can't find. I see.
It might be, though. I'm not really sure. I can't remember.
It's not a publicly traded company yet, so it looks like Tesla is the only company we can base this off of. And, it doesn't really look like the company's been having a good time since you made those comments. If you look at this drop right here, Matthew, where I'm looking, it seems that almost all of the stock drop, it's dropped nearly like $100, has been ever
Let's
since.
see. Do a 1-day chart. So it's down 7% almost today. I do a 5-day chart. And it's down 8% over the last 5 days. So yeah, it looks like October 14th, yesterday, it took a pretty sharp dive and it's going down and it's not recovering. So yeah, it might be because of his statements.
Yeah, because let me go over to his Twitter real quick. Now this is kind of the icing on the cake for me, and it's kind of, and this is when I say icing on the cake, this is starting to show what all of this is being done for. So let me go down. Now he's selling some kind of thing called burnt hair, which is some kind of a perfume or something. But moving on down, let's see. Trying to move on down and find it.
And also, folks, to be clear, I didn't say that it was solely because of his statements that Tesla stock went down. I know the stock market's been having a rough time in the past week, but it could have a part in it, but probably not a huge part.
Well, let's see here. Where in the world is this tweet? It was recently. Everyone's saying all the stock fells. Well, all the stock fell. Most likely it did. I haven't been watching the stock link. The stock market, stock link. What am I talking about? Anyways. Elon Musk said 9 hours ago, the hell with it. Even though Starlink is still losing money and other companies are getting billions of taxpayer dollars, we'll just keep funding the Ukrainian government for free. So interesting.
That honestly, Enforcer, I get kind of like I don't want to say the curse word on stream, but it seems kind of like a smart aleck response, like a little bit of a tone of sort of sarcasm in there a little bit.
It kind of seems like it. One thing that is kind of getting me with this though is that kind of reversal. He literally went from, if you saw it on Twitter, someone said, now he's doing this because the Ukrainian ambassador to Germany told him to F off, and then he replied to this guy and said, yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. And now he's done a complete 180 reversal in 48 hours. This entirely to me seems like it is probably, and let me go check Dow Jones, and let's just take a look at how bad the drop has been over 5 days. So from October 14th at 10 a.m., and we'll go look at Tesla at October 14th at 10 a.m. So we can see that the drop at 10 a.m. was pretty
although, Enforcer, I would probably look at the S&P instead, because the Dow Jones isn't probably the best to look at on that particular stock, because it's a tech stock.
Gotcha. So we'll go over here to the 5 days. And let's go look at Tesla's graph. You see, the S&P, from what I'm looking at, looks to kind of plateau a little bit and then drop and then plateau. But Tesla's is almost like just a nice steep hill. It just keeps on dropping a little bit faster even than average for the S&P. And once again, I'm not a huge stock person, so I don't really know a lot about this. Matthew would be the one to know a lot more about this. So Matthew, speaking of that, what would your analysis be of this situation?
Honestly, thinking about it and seeing what people said in the live chat, honestly, I will have to agree with everyone. It may be attributed to his statements that Tesla went down a little bit, but looking at the situation again, I would have to take that back. It looks like the stock market has just been having a bad week, so it likely had little to no impact on the stock.
Probably, most likely, I'll have to go with that. I'll have to take your take your word for it, because I'm going to have to be honest with everyone. I don't really know a lot about the stock market. I haven't really got into it much. I'll probably have to start looking into that a lot more in the future whenever I can get the time. But
Enforcer, go back to Elon Musk's tweet real quick, because I want to read that language one more time.
All right.
Now, honestly, reading that, I want to be upfront. I don't dislike Elon Musk. I think he's a really smart guy when it comes to his companies. He's really built a lot of value for a lot of people. But that statement he just made right there was another distasteful statement, because he kind of took a dismissive approach to a very serious situation. People are dying in Ukraine. He's kind of like his language, the hell with it. We're going to keep funding the government for free like it's a willy-nilly issue. It's like your decision here might cost lives. So he's kind of approaching it from a real whimsical position. That doesn't seem appropriate to me.
It doesn't seem appropriate, and honestly, his whole handling of this hasn't seemed to have been too good. And honestly, I see this as a reversal to try and save his popularity and public image. And it's not really at all about him being slighted. Now he sees it as, oh, people aren't looking at me favorably anymore, and I was supposed to be the cool, snarky guy that everyone liked, so now I'm not getting that. So let me go and quickly reverse everything that I've done in the past few days with this comment here, but still try and save a little bit of face by making it sound like it's all just willy-nilly, like, you know what, screw it, we'll just do it. So gotta be honest, and some people are saying it's just sarcasm and humor. It honestly seems to me not to be the case. Of course, you can take context, you can take text way out of context just reading it, but honestly don't like that. I would have rather liked it more if he had stuck to his guns, but now this looks like it's just him just trying to keep up some face or some image and try and save his reputation that's now been damaged heavily with the public. And not only that, he's now damaged it as well with people who are pro-Taiwanese by going and saying stuff where the Chinese are like, hey, we'll give you a tax break over here thanks to saying that. Thank you, man. So, yeah.
I wish that at this point, this entire situation never happened between Elon and Ukraine. If they could just like take back all the things they've said, including what Zelenskyy and his other guy in the government said, there's been regrettable things said on both sides of this at this point. It's really gotten out of hand. It seems like Elon's digging his hole a little bit deeper, and I haven't heard anything else from Ukraine yet, but they're not totally like, faultless either in this. It hasn't really gone good.
No, it hasn't gone all too good, but one thing I would have to say is that the Ukrainian ambassador to Germany had a really out-of-line response, which was a one-off. Zelenskyy did some things that weren't ideal, but you could kind of see where it was coming from, especially when the Ukrainian government's official stance is that Crimea is theirs, and then Elon says that it's always been Russia's. You could see where a lot of frustration came from out of that statement. But still, that to give credit to give blame where it's due. The Ukrainian ambassador to Germany's comments were very out of line and very undiplomatic and brutish coming from someone in his position. But Elon has almost kept on digging the grave deeper. While the Ukrainians moved on from that situation days ago, Elon's almost been living in like a feedback loop here for the past few days, and it's not really getting a lot better. So with that, we're going to be moving on from this because, honestly, this is probably one of the least appealing things that's happened in this war so far. So I hope we addressed that poll fairly well. And we are on to the next one if we have one. And if not, we're on to the questions.
All right. So that was the last poll. But guess what? My spreadsheet is locked up and it's doing all kinds of weird, buzzing stuff. I don't know how to describe it. It's really going weird. So Enforcer, if you could stall for just a moment while we do that. I did see that Jay sent in a $10 super chat, but without a comment. So Jay, thank you very much for that.
Wait a minute. You said stall? You said stall, Matthew?
I said stall.
Got you. Let me do that real quick. Sync rate. Pull up.
No, that's classic.
Yeah. Let's see. What else can we stall about? Let's stall. Fun fact, everyone. Did y'all know that the Washington D.C. is actually a giant conspiracy theory? I'm just playing. Interestingly enough, one thing that I find really cool and something that isn't really talked about in the United States while we're trying to stall for Matthew's stuff to get working again is Union Station in Washington D.C. This is one of the few stations in the entirety of the United States that remains almost in this original form that was made in. So now that we've stalled enough, we're going to now hop back to Matthew for the questions. And so what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so now that the spreadsheet has decided to work finally, we're moving on to our first super chat, which is from Al M., a longtime channel viewer and supporter, and he puts in a very generous $200 donation and says, "Hi, nice. I'm still here. When in Russia, I understood consensus was that Russians were either afraid or hopeless with corruption. I feel 70% reject Putinism, but only 10% speak out, 20% are warped, and 10% are plain evil. Enforcer, what you say, and Matt, maybe a poll for Leaf Spring Army, pay rent, buy pizza."
Hey, well, thank you so much for the support, Al M. We were going to make sure to get some pizza. We actually had pizza last night, I think, wasn't it, Matthew?
I think so.
It was pretty good. It was really good. And we will make sure to buy more pizza and help us to keep on paying tuition. Rent, we don't have to because we live in the basement. So moving on from that.
That sounds lovely. We live in the basement.
It sounds idealistic, doesn't it? The basement. But anyways, moving on from that. When in Russia, I understood consensus that Russians were either afraid or hopeless with corruption. I would agree with you. Because one thing that is very evident to me is that corruption is almost just accepted as normal in Russia, kind of like how some forms of corruption in the United States are just accepted at this point. You know, it's like, oh yeah, that will just happen. We're not going to get into what kinds of corruption that is, but it almost seems like everyone in America, regardless of affiliation, just goes, oh yeah, that's how it will be. And honestly, it shouldn't be that way. I think that everyone should always put a foot down for any kind of corruption regardless. Because once you start to go, well, okay, that little bit of corruption is acceptable. It's like a broken glass window kind of thing where it just starts snowballing into worse and worse corruption. But moving on from that, I would have to agree with your statements that 70% of them are just like, like it's all lost. 20% of them are like, it's kind of okay here. And then 10% of them are the ones we see in the Russian army. I would have to pretty much entirely agree with that. And I wonder if a lot of people in the live chat would agree with that too. And so, Matthew, if you have an idea for a poll, maybe right now would be a good time for a question segment poll. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the massive support, Al M. It helps us out a great deal. It helps this channel to keep on running. And without viewers like you who help to support this channel, it's not possible. And so with that, I thank you so much once again, Al. And with that, we're going to be moving on to the next one. And hopefully Matthew will have that poll up here real soon. And while he doesn't have that poll up, we are going to stall once more, going right back to
what type of poll am I putting up?
A poll about what do y'all think of the Russian people and corruption or something like that, and say a lot of them don't accept it, some of them do accept it, some of them think it's okay, and then something else. If you can't think of a good way to word that poll, though, we will move on. Also, someone said, something funny to me, Matthew. The guy you just had too much commentary. It's the question segment, bozo. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
Yes. All right. So while I put that poll up, we're going to move on to our next super chat. And we have a $75 donation from Mark, Slava, Ukraine, who says, I can confirm that the T-62M does not have an autoloader, just an auto ejector, so 4-man crew.
This just in, Mark has confirmed that the T-62 does not have an autoloader. It is a 4-man crew, and we were able to confirm that last night, I think, way later on in the question segment. So you may have not been around for that, Mark, but we can all confirm now that I was completely wrong. The T-62 did not have an autoloader. It was actually a 4-man crew with a man. Somehow they fit 4 of them in the small tank, and one of them was a loader. I feel sorry for that guy. He probably had chronic back pain for the rest of his life. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support, Mark. You've helped out this channel greatly over the past few weeks, and I thank you so much for sending in massive amounts of support because it helps this channel to keep on running. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support and also helping us to clarify a falsehood that I've been saying a decent amount on stream. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again.
All right, and up next we have a $50 super chat from Sean Collins, who says, would the Abrams tank fare any better than any of the other tanks currently being destroyed in Ukraine?
Can you reread that one again real quick?
Enforcer, are you looking at that second screen again?
Yes, I am.
All right. So that question, let me hold on just a minute. My spreadsheet is having a little glitch. All right. Sean said, would the Abrams tank fare any better than any other tanks currently being destroyed in Ukraine?
I believe it probably would, for the pure reason that it's American. I'm just kidding. Let's get into a little bit of a rabbit hole here. So an M1A1 Abrams, or the M1, well, we're not wanting the flamethrower. We're wanting the M1A1 Abrams. The M1A1 Abrams is supposedly heavily armored compared to the Russian vehicles and also has a lot more advanced technology due to its, I guess you could say, advanced thermals as well as night vision, and also, I guess you could say, just better armor protection by and large. If we go through you see that 10,400 of these little suckers have been built. Quite a decent number, actually. And a lot of them were built in Detroit. Anyways, moving on from... Also, wait a minute. Lima Army Tank Plant. Where's Lima, Ohio? I want to find that. Hang on, Matthew. Let's go find the Lima Army Tank Plant. Lima Army Tank Plant. Apparently, there's a tour of this plant. I doubt that. But let's see. It's just in the middle of this massive fuel silo in Lima, Ohio, which is like in the middle of nowhere. It's just in the middle of all these farm fields. But moving back to it, this is apparently where a lot of Abrams are built. Do they have a lot where they just sit the Abrams out in the open? Or, let's see, there's some right there. There's some Abrams. We can also see them being loaded onto train cars, and also some really rusty-looking Abrams. I think those need some tender loving care or something. They don't look good. We can also see more of them down. Wow, they really just have an Abrams factory right here. Let's take a look and see if there's any pictures of this thing. Sadly not. But we can see that General Dynamics Land System Division up here has gotten 9 reviews, and we do have some pictures of the Abrams being built here. We can also see them building M557s. That is really neat. Look at that. Is that cool or what?
That is cool.
That is pretty neat. I didn't know that there was just a well, of course, obviously there would be a factory out there making these things, but I didn't know they were in Lima, Ohio. Also, these things are a little rusty. But anyways, moving on from that, let's real quick before we answer the question.
Are we rabbit holing?
We kind of rabbit holing.
Enforcer.
Yes. Enforcer, I'm going to sleep. Don't ramble. Okay, so we'll move back on to answer the question. I think they will do better because they have better armor protection. They also have more advanced systems, probably 20 years ahead of the Russian tanks that were made at about the same time. And so with that, I do think they would fare better. And also, it would just help the Ukrainians to have slightly more competent tanks. Of course, these things would probably end up being destroyed at some point, but they would still be a little bit better in the meantime. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and thank you so much once again for the support, and thank you for throwing in a pretty interesting question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $50 super chat from Paul Fitzgerald, who says, "Great job."
And Paul Fitzgerald, I thank you so much for saying we're doing a great job. I try my best to make sure that it is a good job, and I'm glad that you do enjoy it. And also, thank you so much for the support. That support lets us know that it is, in fact, a great job, and that it should keep on going. And that's exactly what we're going to do, since we're on day 235 of the war, and I probably see this thing going into day 365, which would be an entire year from now. So with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again, Paul Fitzgerald.
And next up, we have a $26 super chat from Blue Flam 777, who says, "Ghost Bat, this goes to chat."
And thank you so much for the support, Blue Flame 777. And we're going to make sure that that does go to the chat. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And let's hear that live chat question.
All right, and the live chat question goes to that guy. Yes, he is that guy, pal. Do you think the response to an invasion from the north would be better if it was to happen again?
No, I don't. Better for the Ukrainians? Certainly. Better for the Russians? Absolutely not. The Russians would have to cover all of the ground they've already lost. And just to give a general idea, if they moved from the Belarusian border in this area towards Chernihiv, that's a whole 40 miles that they'd have to cover to get to Chernihiv. Highly unlikely that they'd be able to do that. In a straight line as the crow flies from the Belarusian border to Kyiv, that's about 50 miles that they'd have to cover with subpar troops, with subpar equipment, and subpar supply lines. It would not work at all, and the Ukrainians would probably have to divert a very small amount of forces to launch a decent defensive. So in my opinion, if you're talking about from a Ukrainian perspective, it would be a whole lot better than the first time. If you're talking about from a Russian perspective, it would be a whole lot worse. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well in a fairly concise way. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Frank Albrecht, who does not leave a comment. But Frank, thank you very much for your support. We know you've been supporting us for quite some time, and we do appreciate it very much. And Enforcer, would you like to add a few words to Frank's donation?
Yes, I would like to thank you so much, Frank, for your support. And also, if I remember correctly, there was actually a kingdom in Germany called Albrecht. How's it spelled, Matthew?
Let's see here. It is spelled Alrecht.
So, wait a minute, hang on. Albrecht, spell that one more time again real quick.
All right, just a second. Let me get back up to it. It's Albrecht.
So not the same Albrecht I was thinking about, but there was an Albrecht Dürer who was a German painter. So let's see when. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. One of his paintings were not exactly PG. So sadly, I don't think I'll be able to show that all too much. But there was a German guy who apparently lived in the High Renaissance. That was a painter in Germany. So sadly, it's not the Albrecht that I was thinking about in like a small kingdom in Germany, but still pretty interesting nonetheless. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
Yes, indeed. And also, Kevin, I hope you see your way out the door. It is our show, and we'll talk about what we want to talk about. So, moving on to our next super. Yes.
Hang on, man.
Enforcer wants to add a few bits.
Yeah, all right, everyone, let me roll up my sleeves as we deal with another bot. Kevin Hartman, how is it fair that you have zero experience and are talking like you know about anything? Well, bud, I'll have you know, we on this channel said that the Ukrainians would survive months into the war when everyone else in the world, experts in the Pentagon and the Ministry of Defense in Britain, said they would last 3 days to a week. So I don't know about you, pal, but apparently I know more than an expert does in some things, like history, which apparently no one reads these days. So, real quick, let's all give Kevin Hartman a huge F the bot, so that way we can let him out the door, because that is a stupid comment right there. We've been doing this for 235 days, covering this war, spending 60 hours, well, I've been spending 60 hours a week doing this, covering this news, putting up historical analysis and saying, I don't know, let's wait and see if I'm right. And then it almost always turns out that I'm right. I've been wrong on very few things. I've been, and not to sound like I'm just a know-it-all or anything, but I've gotten more right than most experts have, and they're trying to catch up at this point. And so with that, screw you, Kevin, and we're on to the next one.
Yes. All right. So I see the chat lighting up with F the bot. So that's interesting there. Let's see here. I'm stalling because my spreadsheet is once again locked up. I don't know why, but it's locked up. So Enforcer, give me just a minute to let Google Sheets decide to catch up here. It's still not catching up, so it's going to be just a second.
Oh, no. Oh, no. So, everyone, it looks like everyone is saying F the bot, and it's good to see. Because it's, you know, one thing that's really annoying to me is when people come in here and say, I have no idea what I'm talking about. And if you've been around for a long time, you'll actually have seen that you don't, I don't understand this whole entire thing about experts and stuff. In some areas and categories I do, like being a nuclear physicist or a nuclear rocket scientist or something like that. That would make a lot of sense, because you'd have to have a lot of experience to do any of those things. And I think I said nuclear rocket scientist, and there isn't one of those. But moving on from that, to be an expert in something like politics or war, it's a fairly simple thing to do. I don't know why people act like you have to have 20 years of experience to talk about it, because at some point, goofballs like Henry Kissinger started off with no experience at all, and somehow they're touted as being world experts at politics and war and all things like that. So anyways, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Justice Ryan, who says, Enforcer and Matt, please answer someone's live chat question. I'm looking forward to the charity you're collecting for Sunday night. You two guys, keep up the great work that you're doing.
And thank you so much once again for the support. And we will make sure to answer a live chat question. And I can't wait for the Sunday fundraiser either. We always do a great job at the Sunday fundraiser. The Lee Spring Army always delivers on our goals. And so with that, I'm looking forward to it as well. And let's get to that live chat question.
All right. And that live chat question goes to American Degenerate, who says, you don't hear much about the Spetsnaz anymore. Did they get wasted in the first months of the war or something else?
Well, to answer that question, technically, all Russians are wasted from the start because they're just blitzed on vodka. But to answer that question seriously, I think the Spetsnaz has been having an incredibly rough time in Ukraine, and that's why we've never heard of them, is because every single time I've ever seen a suggestion that they're around, they're always getting hit with artillery. So I think that's the reason why, and I also don't see a lot of ground in areas that they could probably be used. And so with that, I hope that does address the live chat fairly well. Of course, I haven't really seen a lot about the Spetsnaz either. I think they probably were obliterated at the beginning of the war. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for sponsoring a live chat. I'm sure that live chatter appreciated having their question answered fairly quickly. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Michelle Esquera, who says, "You guys are awesome. It's brotherly love. I love it. I'm from the South too, and we have lots of morals and values. All these bullies are trying to bully you. They're just jealous of your accomplishments. Keep up the good work."
And I thank you for the support and also the kind words. And one thing I do have to say about the South is that it's kind of a mixed bag, because you can run into people down here, and I'm sure that's like this everywhere, that are incredibly nice and very polite. And there's a very specific way in the South of being polite. It's an incredibly nice way. I have traveled a little bit of the country, and I haven't found people as polite as they are in the South. I think that's one thing that the South has going for it, although there are equal amounts of pros and cons down here. And it's good to know that people really do enjoy that about me and Matthew, because we try our best. And also another thing is that we don't let, at this point, we don't let the bullies and all these people who come through and say stuff like that, they don't get on our nerves. But the one thing that gets me at this point is whenever we just let them slide, because at the beginning I had this idea of we will just quietly dismiss them. And while a lot of people probably don't even read their comments, it gets annoying to see so many goofy people just wander through. You know, some guy who's probably like, you know, I don't know. I mean, like, sometimes I feel like this guy is one of those people who's like, actually, the Tiger II could be used to take out an M1 Abrams. And then they want to come in here and tell me that I have no idea what I'm talking about, although I always back up everything I say with historical evidence and precedent. And so it just annoys me so much whenever people come through and say that, because it's like, unlike most quote-unquote experts, I'll sit there and go, I don't think that's going to happen because it's historically never happened. And then it won't happen. Like, at the beginning of the war, I don't know if y'all were around, but on day 2, I drew up a map, and y'all can go all the way back to that stream and see, and I said, the Russians are going to try and besiege Kyiv and Kharkiv and end the war by having almost a quarter of Ukraine's population encircled in a siege. And that's exactly what they would do over the next 3 days. They did that exact same thing. And ever since that point in this war, everything I have said about how both sides are going to behave and operate based off of historical precedent has largely ended up being accurate. I'm not saying that just as a tooting my own whistle thing. That's how it turned out. Even right now, there were people in a call on the Discord, and I told them how the next weeks of fighting would unfold, and one of those things is that the Ukrainians would push towards Svatove. And right now, the Ukrainians are on the outskirts of Svatove. You can ask them. Like Magic Skygirl was in that call. You can ask these people, did he say that or did he not? There was about 7 of them in that call. And all of them will say yes. And hopefully, and of course, I'm asking those 7 or 8 of y'all to not disclose the entire thing. I just asked that whenever I'm like, hey, did I say that or not? Y'all are like, yes, he did say that. So that way I'm always not looking like I'm just saying that to make myself sound like I know what they're about to do. Hopefully it's close, or if not identical to what they're going to do. So that always annoys me, but we don't let it get to us. It's just goofy to ever see it, and every once in a while you always want to get a quip quo back at them. And so with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $40 super chat from Mark, Slava, Ukraine. Once again, Mark is coming through strong, and thank you very much, Mark, for the support. He says, actually, there is a nuclear rocket scientist. There are several nuclear rocket propulsive designs, unbelievably high ISP, small problem of RUDs during the launch.
Now, thank you for the support, Mark, and I'm glad that you were able to correct me on that, because it is actually interesting. Let's pull that up, actually. Nuclear rocket scientists. Rocket scientist nuclear. That's a really messed up way of saying it. And then Werner von Braun pops up. interesting enough, fun fact about Werner von Braun, he would end up in Huntsville, Alabama. He actually died in Alexandria, Virginia, due to Project Paperclip, where we took a whole bunch of these guys and we just brought them to America. Also, he worked with Walt Disney on a series of films. Interesting. I never knew that, Matthew. Did you know that?
No, it turns out Walt Disney was involved in a lot of stuff I didn't know about.
Yeah. Also, Disney made a lot of really cool little propaganda films in the Second World... Well, propaganda films, you know, whatever you want to call them, in the Second World War that were really neat. Y'all should go check them out. One of them is the funniest one where Donald is working as a shell factory worker. And it was like... That one was kind of funny to me. Anyways, moving on from that.
Wasn't Walt Disney actually an FBI agent at one point?
No, I don't think he was ever an FBI agent. But
I think he was at least like a I guess unofficial agent or some sort. He was involved with the FBI in some way. I remember that.
Let's go down that rabbit hole. Was Walt Disney in the FBI? Because I'm fairly sure he wasn't. Wait a minute. Disney's intel was so valuable that he was made special agent in charge contact. What? By the FBI in 1954, signifying that Disney was an individual who was capable of providing resources to the FBI and taking care of PR issues as well. What? I never knew that.
And look, there's the FBI site. It says subject Walter Elias Disney. They even have a whole file on him.
What in the world? What in the world? This is insane. I never had any idea that this existed. No way. I mean, that's crazy.
Disney was a Fed.
Yeah, Walt Disney was a Fed. Mickey was a Fed. Report your changes. Mickey Mouse every once in a while, you'd be listening on the phone and you'd hear a little ring, pick it up. Yeah, what do you got? Make sure to file your taxes, bozo! Or something like that. But anyways, with that is something I didn't know. That's a massive shock. Thank you for teaching me something about history, Matthew, that I didn't know.
You're welcome.
But moving on from that, what was the question?
So the question was, let's see.
Wait. Nuclear rocket scientist.
Oh, that's right. It was Mark.
How in the world did we get from nuclear rocket scientists to Walt Disney being an FBI informant?
You talked about the nuclear rocket scientist, then you went to Werner von Braun, and then we went to Walt Disney. Walt Disney was a Fed, and then we went to We're Lost.
Okay, that was probably the weirdest rabbit hole we've ever done that went in the oddest direction. But anyways, getting back to that is really cool to see that there are nuclear rocket engines being developed. And I wonder if that is actually a sustainable practice, because one thing, interesting enough, that a lot of people may not know is that there's a very limited amount of nuclear fuel on this planet. And with the current amount of nuclear reactors we have in service, it's supposed that we'll only have about 95 more years of nuclear fuel before it's entirely expended. So either we have to start mining this stuff from space, which is plausible, or we just run out of it, which is kind of weird to think about. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, Mark, and also thank you for correcting me on that, because I would hate to have been wrong on something that interesting and that cool. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support, and also bringing that to our attention.
Yes, indeed, and we totally got lost on your question, but thank you very much for the support. Oh, up next, we have a $20 super chat from SuperBonker9000, who says, here's my small contribution to your trip to Poland. While there, please visit Krakow and Auschwitz. You'll have your mind blown. And chat question, please.
Ooh, I thank you so much for the support. And that's one thing that, man, you know, I don't even know if tourism should be allowed to those. I say this, and let me give my context out. I don't even know if tourism should be allowed to those places, because thinking about the hundreds of thousands, well, really, it was over 1 million people that were killed at Auschwitz alone, in the 3 compounds that made up Auschwitz. It just feels very odd to think about traveling to a place like Auschwitz and walking on the very area of ground that over 1 million people were killed at. That's something to me that's like, you know, and also another thing about it is that a lot of people disrespect Auschwitz when they go there. You know, they take funny selfies and all that kind of stuff on the same place that 1 million people died at. So I would probably go there. It's just that that's such a tough one, you know, because it's like, gosh, well, you know, such an atrocity. Like, we'll go there real quick. Auschwitz, in Poland. There was actually about 3 or 4 compounds that would make up Auschwitz. If I can find, here's one of them. I believe this is actually the famous Auschwitz-Birkenau, and then there was about a couple of other compounds outside of this area, and I wonder if we can find them. They were actually photographed by a U.S. reconnaissance plane at a time, and the U.S. knew for an incredibly long time that they existed, pretty much since their inception, because you can see them directly referenced and also what was happening in them in the movie Casablanca, where they said, you don't want to end up in a German concentration camp. People kind of go hungry and get a little thin in there, and of course it was making fun of, well, making light, I guess you could say, of the pretty morbid situation that pretty much everyone knew in 1942, well, really 1941 when the movie was being filmed, as to what was happening inside of the very few concentration camps that existed at the time. Sadly, I cannot find the other camps in the surrounding areas. It looks like all of those may have been removed, although I'm not entirely sure, and Auschwitz-Birkenau is the only one that remains. But that's man, it's really honestly sick to think that 1.2 million people died in these camps. You know, in just Auschwitz. Of course, there was around, I believe, 8 to 11 million that were killed in all of the camps collectively, but in Auschwitz alone, somewhere around 1 million to 1.2 million Jews and other groups would be killed in this camp. But anyways, yeah, I would probably go and try and take a look, but I would like to. Of course, I always like to focus on the positives. Y'all know that. So I would like to go and check out all of the neat Polish history, like the medieval 1600s Polish history, when there was Poland, Lithuania, and all kinds of other things. But I thank you so much for the support. I hope we were able to address that comment fairly well. And let's hear that live chat.
All right, so the live chat question goes to Alpha 10, who says, do you think Russia even has a nuke that will fly Slava Ukraine?
I think Russia would have a few nukes that would fly, but I feel like the inaccuracy and the ineffectiveness of most of those missiles would be apparent upon launch. That is me in a very eloquent way trying to say I feel like they would most likely fail or explode immediately upon launch. And so with that, I thank you so much for the question. That was a really good one, actually, and I hope I was able to answer it fairly well. And with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope we were able to address your comment and the live chat fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
All right. And real quick, to address the poll that has been up for about 20 minutes now, the question is, what do you think of the Russian people and their view of the corruption in their country? It looks like 37% said they turn a blind eye to it, 24% said they know it exists, and 37% said they are scared to speak out, while only 3% said none of the above. Now, I saw a lot of people saying they wish there was an all of the above option, and I wish I could have included that, but sadly I ran out of options. But for me personally, I would have to say it's probably mainly a mixture of they know it exists and scared to speak out. I don't think they're really turning a blind eye to it willingly. It's probably because of many other factors. But Enforcer, what are your thoughts?
I would have to say, I think I would honestly have to say it's probably a combination of the three. They turn a blind eye to it, they're scared to speak out, and they know it exists as well, of course. Because I just don't see a way where Russians can be blind to the corruption that's present. I mean, the cops are corrupt as hell in Russia, and that's the basic level of governance where most people will run into the government, you know, on a day-to-day basis. So with that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on to our next super chat, we have a $20 super chat from Joe Little, who says DJI has officially been blacklisted by the U.S. Department of Defense by classifying it as a Chinese military company.
Really? Wait a minute, hang on.
I thought it had been that way for a while.
DJI been blacklisted? Oh, when did this happen?
I'm not surprised, honestly.
5 days ago. Yep, 5 days ago. Well, what do you know? Jeez, that's something. So both sides, both the Russians and the Ukrainians, are using these drones, and I wonder if the Chinese are collecting I guess you could say, data from these drones, seeing how they're operated, used, and flown, and trying to implement that into their own forces and seeing which side is using them the most effectively. Well, that is some interesting information. I'm glad you shared that with us, because, Matthew, we need to go get a hammer and take out our DJI real quick.
No, absolutely not.
Well, I mean, anyways, with that, I thank you so much for the support. Thank you for sharing that with us, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Blue Flam 777, who says, boop, boop, beep, bip, beep, 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 boop, boop. No, boop, effing beep for blank's sake. Love you both. The question goes to the chat.
And I thank you so much for the support as I take a sip of water to keep my voice in perfect running order, kind of like oiling a machine. And so with that, we're going to take a live chat. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and this one is sponsored by Blue Flam 777, and the question goes to Book Bandit, and I think this is a really good question. He says, do you feel that the use of uploaded footage has made significant effects to the war? And Enforcer, before you answer that question, here's something I thought as we were watching the footage on tonight's stream. How are the Ukrainian units able to spend the time editing the footage that they make? Because some of them have quite good edits. I wonder if they send them off to like some central place to be edited and uploaded, or is it done by the unit themselves?
I feel like it's most likely done by the unit, because one thing that everyone always has to remember is that out of an entire military unit, only 1 in 5 of those soldiers are going to be in the infantry. So there are 4 other guys out of every 5 that are not in any kind of combatant role. They're in some kind of supporting roles. And so I'm sure that they have some pretty decently sized PR units in each of these brigades. And they just send off all of these clips to those guys that then edit them up and then pump them out. So that's what I'm thinking is most likely going on. So, you know, like, think about it like this, like a guy like Starsky, but instead of him being like on the front page, you know, of the PR in his brigade, where, you know, he's out there making videos, he's on camera, and he's doing all that stuff, there's a guy in the background just like him, but his job is to edit these videos together and then put them out into the public. So I think that's most likely what's happening. And also, to answer that question, because that was a great question, the video footage has made a massive impact on this war. One, because it's making it a lot more accessible to the public, and we've seen that each time a war has become more accessible to the public. First it was through radio, well, actually first it was through Telegram, then it was through, I guess you could say, radio, then it was through TV, which was Vietnam, and now it's through direct video upload to the internet, which is the present day. When you see that each time, it makes wars more and more enraging in a way, and more insightful to how they actually work. If anyone wanted to really know how battles are fought, instead of having to read these massive volumes of textbooks and first-hand accounts from officers in the field and enlisted men who wrote down journals and diaries, now you can just click on a video and watch a Ukrainian unit for 8 solid minutes engaging in a firefight and see exactly how that unfolds on the very day of. And so I think that that's made a massive impact, especially to the public's understanding of war, how it's fought, and what's really going on over there. Instead of it just being a faraway thing, it's right there at that very moment, at that very instant. War has never been closer to us, information-wise, than right now. And so with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, and we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support and sponsoring that live chat, because that was a very good question.
Yes, indeed. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from PackRats4, who does not leave a comment. But PackRats, thank you very much for your support. We also have another viewer called just PackRat, so maybe you're related potentially. But thank you very much for the support. And Enforcer, would you like to say a few words?
And yes, I would like to thank you so much for the support to both of our PackRats, because y'all have helped us out a lot. I guess they're rats. Rats. We're the rats. Do you know what I'm talking about, Matthew?
Yes.
I'm the giant rat. Anyways, keep moving on. I thank you so much to both of y'all for y'all's support. It helps this channel out massively, and I've got to say that without all of y'all's support, this channel couldn't keep on running. And so, thank you so much once again, and we are moving on into the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from Rado Kudre, who says, with winter coming, winters can be very cold in eastern Ukraine. What will this do to front lines? Will this war become positioning war in winter months?
I feel like in the winter months, it will most likely start to become a lot more stagnant, but the Ukrainians will still be the ones who hold the initiative and are the ones who are moving. I feel like it will be movement at a slower pace, but that will not stop the Ukrainians from trying to achieve massive tactical and strategic victories in the winter, while the Russians will be at their worst. There's no way that the Russians will be able to prepare for this winter. They already have not. They have failed at this task. And so the Ukrainians will be well above them in, I guess you could say, a condition, although they'll still be suffering a little bit, and they'll be able to blow through the Russian line. So I see that it could be a defensive war for the Russians like it is now, where they're trying to just shift numbers around the front to try and offset the Ukrainian tide, but I don't think it will stop the Ukrainians at all as the winter months set in. But then again, I can be entirely wrong. Usually, historically, the winter months are when you see the least activity. But one thing I gotta say, though, is that there are exceptions to that rule. For example, Stalingrad is a massive one. Stalingrad was won in the winter by the Soviet Union encircling the German, I believe it was the 8th Army that was at Stalingrad. So, with that, keep it in mind that winters do not stop massive offensives and activities, but it can hinder them if the weather is severe enough. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and I thank you so much for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and real quick to address the poll, should places like Auschwitz be open to tourists? It looks like 85% said yes, we must remember atrocities, 11% said not sure, undecided, and 4% said no, these sites should be off limit. Now, for me, I think that they should remain open, but with the condition that when people visit the site, if they're acting disrespectful or they're, acting out of line or inappropriate, that they're simply kicked out and removed, because there has to be some kind of level of, I guess, solemnness to it, because you're not going there to have fun. It's not a tourist attraction. You're going there for historical reasons, to educate yourself, and to see basically where an atrocity happened. But Enforcer, what are your thoughts?
I would have to say that it's a tough one for me, and let me explain kind of like my line of thinking. Hopefully, everyone kind of sees where I come from. People these days, and don't take this the wrong way. Allow me to explain this all before you come to a judgment. People these days kind of get a little bit too much of an idea that because there is a freedom of expression and speech, that means you can go around acting like however you want, wherever and whenever, regardless of the context. And I think that that's starting to be kind of taken out of tone these days, and people are starting to become tone deaf. Like, you'll see a lot of people go around and joke and like pretty much harass the household guards in London, whether it's the Horse Guard parade grounds, Windsor Castle, Buckingham Palace. Those are actual soldiers in the British Army that people are just harassing and treating like jokes, which they shouldn't be, because they're actual guards and the weapons have a purpose. They're legit. And I don't get why people, I don't know why. I feel like respect in certain situations and context is being lost on people nowadays. People don't really get a lot of I guess you could say the atmosphere. There's a certain way that people have to act in certain situations. That's just a societal norm, and it's almost disappearing these days. And Auschwitz is an excellent example, because in the past recent years, a lot of articles that have been coming out from these concentration camps like Dachau, Auschwitz, among others, is that people go there and they treat them like jokes, and they don't put any kind of proper context in mind when being there. And so I feel like they should be open to the public, but there should be a heavy societal pressure that when in these areas, there's a certain kind of atmosphere that should be followed, and a certain kind of respect that has to be enforced in a way. And of course, someone's about to say, you're clamping down on freedom of expression. No, I'm not. But you've got to understand that there's a certain way you have to act in certain situations. If you're meeting the President of the United States, regardless of who that president is, you ought to act respectful, because just to respect the position, not really the person, but more so the position. And if you're going to a place like Auschwitz, or if you're going to let's just say the Ukrainian Rada, you should have a certain way that you behave, because it's socially appropriate. So with that context in mind, I would have to say if people could treat it appropriately, then it should be open to the public. But if it just became a playground pretty much for people to go and just mess around on the same ground that 1 million people died on, then I would have to change my stance then. So I hope everyone kind of gets where I'm coming from, because I feel like that kind of mindset in the public is kind of being lost. I don't know why. It's kind of like I can't even historically I don't even understand where it's coming from, but it's starting to become a lot more prevalent these days that people don't really attach a lot of respect to really anything, regardless of what it is. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and I hope I addressed that poll fairly well, and I hope you all see where I'm coming from.
Yes, indeed. And moving on to our next super chat, we have a $40 donation from Catherine Kingdon. I think this is her second support of the night. So thank you very much, Catherine, for the support. We do appreciate it very much. She says, thank you for all your work and greatly appreciated.
And thank you so much for the support. That support helps out this channel massively. And of course, without it, we wouldn't be able to keep the thing running. And so thank you so much, Catherine Kingdon, for your support. It helps us out greatly, and I thank you so much for enjoying all the work we do, because we greatly appreciate y'all watching this and enjoying it, because we put in a massive amount of work to make sure that a lot of people can always listen into what's going on in this war day by day. I'm glad that a lot of people can. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that addresses the comment fairly well, and with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again.
All right, and up next, we have a $15 super chat from Chris, who says, have you seen the reports coming out about the IVAS VR military goggles? Doesn't sound good.
I have not heard of those reports. I'm trying to think if I've ever have, and I don't think I have. I'll try and look into those reports, but sadly, at this very moment, I'm going to have to declare ignorance on it because I have no information to work off of to make any kind of intelligent statements. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment. Kind of, but I will look into it and try and get some information on it. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support, and we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next, big shout out to Catherine Kingdon once again for putting in that second super chat of the $15. I knew I saw it somewhere, so Catherine, thank you very much once again. We do appreciate it. And up next, we have a $15 donation from Santiago Flores, who says, donating a live chat question, and thanks for everything. And Santiago, thank you very much for your support. And this question is sponsored by Santiago Flores, and it goes to, let's see here, Paul Benz, who says, if in an American conflict democracy was at stake, I like to think that nukes would be ruled out. Why can the Russian/Soviet Army Old Guard not be trusted to have our same morals?
Well, they cannot be trusted to have our same morals, because we can already see that on the front lines. They don't have the kind of morals that the West has. And I've actually seen someone say this on YouTube, real quick, to make a counter to this, is that is mere propaganda to dehumanize the Russians, because they really do have the exact same morals of the West. And I have to disagree, because no Western commander, no Western army would ever put their soldiers in conditions like they are in Kazan, getting colds and pretty much dying of illness before they can ever get anywhere, or running their soldiers over with an armored personnel carrier, sending them like cannon fodder to die on the front. That right there shows me that they morally have no base like the West does, where we sit there and think, oh, oh my God, think about all the human lives that would be lost. That really doesn't even weigh in on a Russian commander that we can see in the field. And those same commanders in the field are the same ones in the nuclear battery. And so for that reason, that's why it can't really be ruled out that these nuts wouldn't use nukes, because they will just throw people into a meat grinder without any question. They act like it's encouraged, actually. So with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well. That's why I don't really trust them to not use nukes. And by and large, of course, this is a wishful thinking thing. Nukes will never disappear from the world again, but I wish that nuclear disarmament could happen, so that way wars that needed to be fought, and I would have to say this, keep this in mind, if nuclear weapons were gone, the wars we would witness, the conventional ones today, would be on a level of devastation and scale, the likes of which the world had never seen before. They would be leaps and bounds above World War II in the amount of devastation that they could reap. But then again, hopefully that would be mitigated by the precision strikes and all of that stuff. But still, I think that a conventional war, the amount of human lives, the millions that would be lost there, is far better than the alternative of one thing slipping and then the entire world just gets obliterated and that's the end of it. So with that, I hope that addresses the comment fairly well. And I thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Smart Lucker, who says, as a person who played trumpet for 10 years, that quote-unquote performance made me want to leave the stream. The Belarusian band is worse than my elementary school band. God have mercy on all other band nerds.
Oh, and I thank you so much for the support. You may not believe this, but I actually played trumpet for about 2.5 years in middle school. And our band was better than that. And so I would have to totally agree with you that that was terrible as a trumpet player myself, not with as much experience as you, but still some nonetheless. That was awful. And I've never heard anything that horrendous before in my life. They beat even the Egyptian military band, and they are terrible. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
All right, and we have another super chat from Mark, Slava Ukraine, who puts in, it looks like a $40 donation this time, and thank you once again, Mark. I know we've said that 1,000 times tonight, but really, we do appreciate it. He says, I support this channel so much because of the personality of Matt and Andrew, the work put despite the pressures of studies, etc., the respectful, humble tone, the amazing depth of knowledge, and the viewer engagement. Well done, guys. And thank you, Mark. That's very kind of you to say.
And thank you, Mark. That honestly sounds like a column in a paper that's a review on this channel. You know, it's like, I support this channel so much because of the personality of Matt and Andrew, the work put despite the pressures of studies, etc., the respectful, humble tone, the amazing depth of knowledge, and the viewer engagement. Well done, guys. And it honestly sounds like something in a magazine. But I thank you so much for the kind words, Mark. That was an incredibly kind review that you've given this channel, and I'm glad that you do enjoy it so much, and that you're helping to support it and keep it running. You have helped this channel out massively, and I say that every single time you send one in. But not only that, in case if y'all do not remember, although I don't see how anyone could not remember this, Mark is the legend that threw in $20,000 on a single night on a fundraiser. And that right there alone has you emblazoned in channel memory for all time, including Naria. Naria is also on way up there, very close to you. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Mark, and those kind words as well. I'm glad that you do enjoy this stream, and I'm glad that we're able to keep this thing trucking as the Lee Spring Army. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again.
All right, and next up, we have a $20 super chat from Rado Kudre. Once again, he says, seems like wars are lost in winter times. Napoleon, Hitler, and hopefully Putin this time. What Ukraine needs to do not to lose ground in winter months.
Let's see what Ukraine needs. One thing I have to say though is that the Ukrainians are have already achieved the initiative before the winter, and so it will have to. So it's actually flip-flopped. The Russians will have to try and keep the ground going on into the winter months, because one thing that a lot of people don't think about is that Napoleon had already lost the initiative by the time he reached Moscow and winter had set in. That had already been lost by him. And so the winter just further exacerbated that loss of the initiative and made it far worse, along with Hitler and his armies in Moscow, Leningrad, and also Stalingrad in the Second World War. They had already started to lose the initiative by the time that fall had come around, and so winter just exacerbated those issues far worse, and then the Soviets capitalized on that and were able to defeat them decisively at Stalingrad, which then led to a collapse at the Southern Front, and then, I guess you could say, as collateral, the rest of the fronts that were involved in the Soviet Union. So, right now, the situation is not being seen in Ukraine. The Ukrainians strongly have the initiative right now. They are still taking ground, and they are slowly grinding their way towards Svatove, I believe is how it's pronounced, someone said in the live chat. And with that in mind, the Russians have lost the initiative, and so the winter is further going to exacerbate their loss of the initiative, and hopefully the Ukrainians can capitalize on it. So that's the way I see it going. The Russians could try and mitigate that loss through a couple of means. One could be is that they could start building prepared defensive positions behind their current existing lines, expect to lose ground, and then set up in those pre-made defensive positions. That would help them out a little bit in staving off the massive amount of ground that they could possibly lose during this winter months. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And I thank you so much once again for the support. Really interesting question, but I have to do a quick little switcheroo there because historically, it would be the other way around. It wouldn't be Ukraine trying to save themselves ground. It would be the Russians trying to save themselves ground. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from G Rodeo, who says, there have been no apparent attempts to assassinate Zelenskyy for quite a while. Do you believe the West has communicated that killing Zelenskyy would trigger NATO involvement?
Let's see. Can you reread that again real quick?
He says, there have been no apparent attempts to assassinate Zelenskyy for quite a while. Do you believe the West has communicated that killing Zelenskyy would trigger NATO involvement?
I don't think anyone has, and I don't think it would, because I haven't ever heard a definitive statement on that. Because when everyone was trying to go for Zelensky's head at the beginning of the war, we never really saw the West say, if you kill him, something's going to happen. And we've never really seen them say that yet. So I don't think we would come to blows over Zelenskyy being assassinated. But once again, take that with a grain of salt. I'm just working off of the fact that there's never been an official comment on that, suggesting that. But there could be a plan for that in the background. I'm not entirely sure. But I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment as best as I can with the information I have at my disposal. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Sausage Gravy Biscuit, who says, turning into a regular, Slava Ukraine, and donate a question to the chat. And Sausage Gravy Biscuit, that is quite a good breakfast meal, by the way. Anyways, we are going to go ahead and choose that live chat question in your honor. And the question goes to, let's see here, Rodent of Anger, who says, question for the enforcer. Do you think that Russia is putting troops and equipment into Belarus in order for Putin to claim some territorial victory?
I don't think he's going to be trying to claim a territorial victory from that. I think that's entirely a ruse to try and move Ukrainian forces from the south towards the north to try and relieve their forces. Actually, that all starts to work together when you think about it. The Russians have lost the initiative. Like I said, the Ukrainians have it going into the winter. That means that the Russians' losses and their loss of the initiative will be further exacerbated by the winter, and the Ukrainians will be able to take advantage of it. And so a mitigating factor that they could do is to move their forces into southern Belarus and make it appear that another offensive may begin from there, which pulls Ukrainian forces off these southern lines, which will make sure that there are less offensives that occur in the winter that will be able to take advantage of their detrimental situation in the south. So I think that that's most likely the reason why the Russian forces are being moved into the southeast. But remember, take that with a grain of salt. That whole entire epiphany just happened within like a half second just on that question. So I could be entirely wrong, but that would all work together to seem to be a plausible explanation of why those Russian forces have been moved into Belarus. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well, and thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Justin Nourse, who says, Enforcer, starting next week, 14 NATO members will take part in Steadfast Noon. Russia has said Grom will take place late October. Is that just a coincidence with timing?
I think it most likely isn't, because let me check real quick. Let me make sure I'm understanding this correctly. Steadfast Noon. Ah, yes. Steadfast Noon. It's a nuclear drill. It sounded like it, because here in the world calls it Steadfast Noon. So I believe that considering that those are being done at almost the exact time, it may not be. It may be trying to see if the other one will flinch a little bit in their drills, which is kind of a little bit concerning considering both, well, not really, because if the Russians pull anything, that means a Western response is immediate because they're already in the middle of a drill. So with that, I would honestly have to say that may not be coincidence. That may be done for a reason, and NATO may be doing Steadfast Noon at that exact time to make sure that a Steadfast Noon doesn't happen. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and I hope I was able to answer that question fairly well, and thank you so much once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Max, who says, thank you guys for the dedicated reporting.
And thank you so much, Max, for enjoying our dedicated reporting. That's one thing that I prided this channel on, is that while others have taken breaks, others have gone and wandered away, this channel always remains and is always covering this news every single day, except for Mondays, of course. And so with that, I thank you so much for enjoying our consistency, Max. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and we do have about 28 more to go. So up next, we have a $10 super chat from Ole Wolansky, who says, thanks for building awareness about history. The atrocities of the Soviet Union, facts, have been conveniently overlooked in the past and are now in front of our eyes.
And I thank you so much for enjoying that. And I think history is probably the most important thing to talk about in the modern context, especially with culture, politics, and war, because you can understand a lot through how it developed in history. That's something that a lot of people don't understand, and I cannot stand the modern expert because they throw all of that precedent out the window. And it's like this in the field of attorneys as well, from what I can tell. They throw basic common sense precedents out the window to come up with these abstract, harebrained ideas that just don't make any sense. Like, oh, the Russians, they have clown cars and they're going to drive them through Kharkiv and to Marifa, and then Kharkiv is theirs. Like, it's like, what in the world are you talking about? It's like these people don't even know what they're talking about at all, and they just call themselves experts, and they get that title because people gave it to them, but they have no idea what they're talking about. Like, it's basic stuff, and I'm not going to go through that massive rabbit hole of why it's basic, but I just feel like a lot of that could be quelled easily if people actually just understood history and the precedent and the actual meaning it has in the modern world. Because it always has meaning, and people always overlook it. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And moving right along, we have a $10 super chat from Dwayne Porter, who says, "Good evening, guys. You went over the Russian losses, but you should also include the Russian equipment repossessed by the Ukrainians, Slava Ukraine."
And I thank you so much for the support, and we would do that if we could have some information on the total numbers as of that day. It seems like the Ukrainians only compile those every few weeks or every few months, so sadly we haven't been able to find that on a daily basis. But I thank you once again for the support. Pretty good idea, and with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $10 super chat from Vance Hicks, who says, "Enforcer, do you think the mobilization of these civilians will put much pressure on Ukraine, or are they throwing more meat on the grill?"
I think they're throwing more meat on the grill. The soldiers that they're trying to introduce into this area, the conscripts and also the ones supposedly in the north in Belarus, they're not going to be able to do anything. It's just that's just hardcore fact at this point. I already said, and once again, this is something to prove me right. I said before the mobilization happened, and I bet you remember this, Matthew. I said this exactly on the stream the day before. Everyone's saying that a mobilization is going to happen. It's not going to change anything because the Russians will most likely not even be able to supply these soldiers with any kind of meaningful equipment or supplies to field them effectively in Ukraine. Did I say that or did I not, Matthew?
You did.
And I bet a lot of people who were watching that stream that night can confirm that I did say that, and that's exactly what happened. And I'm telling y'all, there is no way that the Russians can support nor field any more soldiers than they currently have, because they can hardly keep those alive as it is. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment, and I hope that also adds a little bit of historical precedent as to what this channel has said over the past month or two. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support, and I hope that answers the question.
All right, and up next we have a $10 super chat from Jay, who says, "I want to say there was incoming rounds from aircraft in Stinger video. Brave Ukrainians."
And I think we did see that, actually, and that was really odd to see and pretty crazy. And also, it does show a decent amount of their bravery, just considering that rounds are whizzing past them, and they're still determined to shoot that little drone, missile, aircraft, helicopter, or whatever it was down with that Stinger. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support and pointing that out, because Ukrainian soldiers have been incredibly brave every time we've seen them on film. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Susie Q, who says, "I seem to remember Naria donating 5,000 3 times on Sunday, then 5,000 last time, making her and Mark almost tied. Anyway to check. Excuse me. You boys rock. Get some fresh-made pico Digalo, something like that, and chips on, oh my god, how did I mispronounce that? Pico de Gallo and chips on me."
And I thank you so much for the support. We will have some of that on you. Hopefully not on you, because that would be kind of weird to eat. Like, probably. Anyways, we're going to move on from that, because that's just going down a bad path. But I thank you so much for the support, Suzuki. And sadly, there is no way, I hate to say this, there's no way for us to go back and check the exact totals in between Naria and Mark. The problem being, and here's why, YouTube doesn't give us an exact breakdown of who sent in what on the fundraisers. It just gives us the total. Unlike super chats, we can actually go through super chats and we can see every single super chat that's ever been sent in, but we can't see that with fundraisers. They don't give us that ability, which kind of sucks. But unfortunately, for that reason, we can't go back and find out who has sent in more, Mark or Narya. So unfortunately, we can't tell. I do feel like it is somewhat close, but I think, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm trying to think back. I think Narya maybe a little bit above Mark or a little bit below him. I think I agree with you. They're almost neck and neck. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, Susie Q. I hope that does address the question fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again. But sadly, due to the limitations we get from YouTube with the fundraiser side of things, we can't really go back and see. But with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have an $8 super chat from Veronica M, who says, check out Union Station in Toronto, Canada. Great job, enforcers.
Union Station in Toronto. Is that it?
Yes.
In Toronto. We're going to turn into Owen Wilson here. Wow. So, let's see if I remember. Yep, Toronto's right there. I had to check. For some reason, I always get Vancouver and Toronto's locations mixed up. Wow. Now, I am Owen Wilson. That is... I don't like the modern concourse, but I... Yeah,
is it? Wait a minute. Is it Owen Wilson that says that, or is it Nicolas Cage?
It's Owen Wilson. Wow. He's like the guy who does that. Moving on around. Oh, I love the front of the building. I really love these older style railway stations. They're beautiful. I really love this though. That is so beautiful. I love it. It honestly kind of looks like old Penn Central station in New York City before it was torn down, which was a huge disservice to tear that thing down. But wow, would you look at that? I still have to say, though, in terms of roofs in train stations, Grand Central Station in New York really does top it. Like this roof with, forgot the exact name for this. It's also in the Pantheon. It looks good, but I feel like the design on the roof of the New York Central Station is very nice. Although it isn't really that impressive when you looked at all of the railroad stations that were in New York City when that thing was made. It wasn't the biggest, and it also wasn't the grandest, but it was still quite a nice one to say the least. Where in the world is that train station in New York City? We'll find it some other time. But with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And I hope you enjoyed us taking a look at Union Station in Toronto. And so with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And also, we have a visit from PsyOps. He showed up tonight. He puts in a $20 donation and says, did you see that the FL troops taught the Ukrainian forces... Enforcer, did you see that super chat?
I did.
What does that mean exactly? I'm scared to say it.
1 second. Let me pull it up on the second screen.
I have a feeling PsyOps is being edgy again, so I just want to check.
It is. It is. Sadly, we can't read that. You crazy. You're crazy. Why you gotta? You almost made Matthew do a goof. I'm glad he checked with me real quick because I pulled that up and we can't read that off on stream, PsyOps. But I thank you once again for the support. You've helped out this channel a lot, and I can't show the foreign viewers what that is, but thank you so much once again for the support, PsyOps. And I hate that you throw that stuff in because I almost feel like you're throwing away the opportunity to have the thing read there. But with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support, PsyOps.
All right, and moving on to our next one, we have a $5 donation from Squamous Amos, who says, Woo Pig Suey.
And thank you so much for the support, and Woo Pig Suey. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again for the support, and also the big ol' Woo Pig Suey.
All right, and also, big shout out to Carter165 for putting in a $5 donation, but without a comment, and thank you, Carter, very much for your support. We also have a $5 super chat from Galaxy Fur 4014, who says, once freezing weather moves in, Vlad's force in Ukraine will either surrender in mass, or they will all be stone dead frozen popsicles.
I would have to go. Muhaha. And I'd have to, and I thank you so much for the support. Now I'd have to.
That?
Well, that
sounds like a pin from a grenade falling around.
It is. I have 5 seconds left.
Wow.
It's actually the banjo pick. It was on my desk and I accidentally skimmed my hand over and went So, I just won the jackpot over here. Thank you, Banjo. But anyways, moving on from that, I would have to say they're most likely going to go either way in the winter time. I have fair certainty to agree with you on that one. And so with that, I thank you for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you so much.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Jeremy Burton, who says a Russian sub was caught trying to attack the undersea cable.
Really? I have not heard about that, and I'll have to try and find some news on that to see if that is correct. But I do thank you so much for the support. I will look into that and see if that is the case. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Bilbo Jenkins, who says, I'm looking for my pants and dignity. Slava Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support. I hope you find your pants and your dignity. I don't know what happened to both of them, but I hope you find them with due haste. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Cade Riddle, who says hi. And hi to you, Cade.
And hi to you, Cade, as well. I thank you for the support, and hello. Oh, wait a minute, hang on. Let me do it like that thing on Smiling Friends, as many of you all have heard that frog. Oh, hello. And so that, we're on to the next thing, and thank you so much once again.
All right, and next up, we have a $5 super chat from Anthony Bestwick, who says 3 things to help Ukraine win. First, tailing Kherson. Second, attack them to finish off Crimea Bridge. And third, attack Melitopol to break land bridge.
And I thank you so much for the support. And I would have to agree with all of those things that would be a pretty reasonable action to take. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin, who says that the only reason this war looks like the war 100 years ago is because Ukrainians don't have the latest NATO technology to arm all their soldiers. Otherwise, it would have been over in a couple of days.
Now, thank you for the support, and I would have to agree that is probably the reason why, but at the same time, wars will look pretty rough, and they will reap a lot of damage to a landscape or a town. And so I think it would have looked that way. Well, not really. It wouldn't have looked that way anyways. It probably would have looked quite different if the Ukrainians were a modern Western army with modern Western gear. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
All right, and up next, we have another super chat from Psyops. Let me check this one real quick. Let's see here. It looks like this one might be okay. He puts in a $10 donation and says, this is an anti-pants stream. Why do we think we have only seen Enforcer and Matt from the chest up? And Psyops actually, real quick before the Enforcer answers that question, or the joke rather, I have to actually wear exactly what I wear during the day, or otherwise my mind shuts off. I'm one of these people that has to feel like they're, I guess, like fully like going. I don't know how to really describe it, like fully like gotten ready to feel like my mind is in like tip-top shape. I can't just walk around and wear a t-shirt and no pants and do the stream. My mind simply would not be in the right mode. But Enforcer, what do you think about that?
I would have to agree. To let y'all know what we were wearing during that show, though, like I was not wearing the full World War I uniform. I was actually wearing my normal shorts that I wear everywhere. I wear shorts everywhere, even in the winter almost, unless if it's extremely cold. Then I wear blue jeans. So I was wearing my shorts, and then I was wearing my World War I uniform from the chest up. But I was wearing pants. I was not like Ronnie, because Ronnie like pretty much wears like booty shorts sometimes on his streams. And we weren't wearing that. My shorts go all the way down to my knees. And so with that, I hope also someone just said that Ronnie doesn't wear pants, and that is true, he doesn't. But with that, I hope I answered that fairly well, Siles, and thank you once again for the support, and also trying to cause mischief because you're just a silly little misanthrope. And with that, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Smart Lucker, who says, here's another addition to the Poland Trip Fund.
And thank you so much for the support. And I cannot wait to go to Poland. I think you're going to individually help us to make our way to Poland someday. And I cannot wait to go to Warsaw and enjoy all of the good food there. I'm going to go to Warsaw and I'm going to get myself a Five Guys burgers and fries. Yeah. So with that, we're on to the next one. Thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Philip Fixes, who says, Enforcer weapon onomatopoeia is always on point, requesting an RPG load and launch. Super chat inspired by your artillery tinnitus sounds and Slava LSA.
And thank you so much once again for the support. And a pretty interesting super chat. Sadly, do you know what it means, Matthew?
Let's see. Enforcer weapon onomatopoeia is always on point. I think it's like the saying of the first part of words,
yes,
like load and launch.
It's like the noises and all that stuff that I make, like the tinnitus ring. Oh, okay.
Yes.
And I thank you for the support, and I'm glad that you do enjoy the sound effects. I hope a lot of people do, because I would hate to think that I'm just torturing people with that stuff. But with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Serotonin, who says, keen to know your thoughts. If Russia took nuclear action, where would the prime targets be in each country, including Australia?
Well, my prime thoughts right now is on food. I'm actually quite hungry right now. But to answer that question seriously, the Russians would target, and that would be quite hard to go over in an extensive list. They would practically target everything in the West. They would probably launch nukes at all of the NATO countries individually, most likely their control centers for the military and also their administrative hubs like Washington, D.C. or Oslo or London. And then they would probably... honestly, I would have to say, I think Australia might be able to sail on by without really anything happening to them. But then again, I'm not entirely sure. I feel like Pine Gap would probably get hit, but that's in the middle of the outback, so what's it really matter? Because there's nothing out there. So with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well. I know it's a bit of a short one, but it would be incredibly long to try and get into everything that they would try to hit with a nuclear weapon. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well, and we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Ole Wilansky, who says, do you think Putin has access to outside sources of information, or do they keep him in an information bubble?
They probably keep him in a suspended state of animation, where he is constantly feeling very positive about what's going on. But then again, that can't be true, because we see missile attacks and stuff, and he also has to know about some things going on, like the Kerch Bridge being destroyed. And he can't be like Hitler inside of a bunker going, Steiner's men will break the siege in Berlin, and then Steiner's men are just gone. You know, he can't. I feel like he couldn't be like that, but then again, it did happen before. I just brought up a historical precedent where it did, so I don't really know. And part of me feels like he ought to know, and then part of me feels like he probably doesn't know. And so with that, I hope that answers the question very vaguely. Well, actually, I wish I was able to give a better answer. I kind of ended up answering it vaguely, but I thank you once again for the support, and we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat, excuse me, from Soul Eater, who says, choose a joke from the crowd.
And thank you so much for the support, Soul Eater, and we will try and pick a joke from the crowd. So, let's see here. Let's see, David.
I see one. I don't think it's meant as a joke, but I don't know about that statement.
Can you read it, or is it something unreadable?
I guess it's readable. It's a little bit weird, but they said, Enforcer, if Russia used nukes, wouldn't that actually help the decreasing in young population of developed countries?
Well. We got a little Charles Dickens in the chat, don't we, Matthew? Always talking about the surplus population. Interestingly enough, Matthew, Charles Dickens was obsessed with the concept of too many people being alive on this earth. And he was around in the 1840s. I wonder how he would feel now.
I wonder.
Because back then there was I think 500 million people on the entirety of the surface of the earth. Now there's around close to 8 billion. If he was alive today, he would be frothing in the mouth. I think he would be spinning in his grave so quickly about how many people there are alive now that he could power Russia's failing electrical grid. But to move on from that, that's a funny one. That is actually kind of an interesting and funny yet morbid comment. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support and also letting us read off something of a joke.
All right, and up next, we have a $5 super chat from Crimson FC, who says, you think Ukraine could retake Crimea after Kherson, or would that involve tactical nukes by Russia?
Can you reread that one again real quick?
You think Ukraine could retake Crimea after Kherson, or would that involve tactical nukes by Russia?
I think they could. Considering they attacked the Kerch Bridge and there were supposed to be massive stakes on that and it didn't happen, I think they could get away with Crimea. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment fairly well, and I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Boo, MISC, who says, what's your position on the RCH-155 that Ukraine purchased from Germany? Are remote-controlled SPG the future?
Ah, yes. Only accept the essential cookies. I've
never heard of that before.
Yeah, only accept.
Only the essentials.
Only the essentials.
Only the chocolate chip cookies.
We live a Spartan lifestyle when it comes to cookies. But anyways, I have seen this thing. We actually talked about this a long time ago on stream. I don't know if it'll be effective or not. It may also be a room for the for KMW to see if this thing is effective or not. So I don't really have a lot of opinions on this, but I think that remote control to everything is kind of the direction of warfare in the future, especially when it pertains to vehicles. Although these things will still probably be backed up by infantry in the field, because it's just not a war if there aren't people involved. And so with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well, and I thank you so much once again for the support. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And how many super chats do we have left, Matthew?
So let's see. It looks like we have 10 left.
All right. And so with that, on to the next one. Yeah.
And up next, we have a looks like a $8 donation from Fuzz the Cat, who says, actually, test tasting urine is a very good way of diagnosing diabetes, as kidneys will start excreting sugar when BSL gets excessively high.
And I thank you for the support, Fuzz the Cat. But one thing I gotta say is that I'm not a big fan of tasting people's pee. I don't know. It's just something about it that just seems gross. You know, I'm sure that I know that you are right. That's one thing I know. But it's still gross to me, and I don't know if a doctor should sit there and go, a pee, and then just take a sip of it. You know, like it just seems very gross and unhygienic to me. But with that, I thank you so much.
And also, Enforcer, for the second part of Fuzz the Cat super chat, he said, to be honest, you guys run the worst Russian propaganda channel I've ever seen.
Oh, and I thank you so much for the high praise, Fuzz the Cat. That's some high praise right there. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. Also, the huge praise as well. That was a great praise. I'm glad that we are the worst in that category. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $6 super chat from Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin, who says, I'm a sicko. I just like to hear my avatar name read out in the super chat. And also, once Severodonetsk and Kherson get liberated, it's game over.
And thank you so much for the support. And I would have to, and also, that is kind of funny that you just like, I just want my name read out. She's just like, that's all I'm here for. But I would have to agree that once those two towns are taken, can you reread those again? Because did he say Melitopol or Kherson?
He said, once Severodonetsk and Kherson get liberated, it's game over.
I would have to agree, because those are the first towns on the fringes of both flanks, and so if those are taken, the center will fall soon. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
And next up, we have a $2 super chat from Riley Beatty, who says, did y'all see the Vols game? GBO.
I did not see the game. I have not seen any of the games. I don't watch sports. I have no social life. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that addresses the comment fairly well. And with that, we're on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right. And we also have another $5 super chat from Rado Kudre, who says, you guys are awesome and please keep up the good work. And thank you very much, Rado, for the kind words.
And thank you so much once again, Rado, for the kind words as well. And I like the little thumbs up. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And you are awesome, Rado, for being here every single day for the most part. I've seen you in the live chat most times. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
All right, and up next, I want to give a shout out to Dubsy Dabster, Flowers, Mark Andrew Burnett, and also Moose Bro. They say they love the channel and Slava Ukraine.
And I think each of y'all so much for y'all support. And also, Flower, I told you not to. Flower is a friend of mine that I actually talked to off stream, and I told him not to send in super chats. Yet he did. But I thank all of y'all once again for the support. It helps out this channel, and it helps us to keep running. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $2 super chat from Gilman X, who says, Russia surprised by air war equipment losses from day one.
And I would have to say they are surprised at their air losses, because the Russian air losses are a lot higher than what was anticipated, considering that the Russians thought when they struck the Ukrainian surface-to-air missile battery defense systems where they were at the start of the war, that they destroyed the most advanced ones, and they didn't. And so they started to take a lot more air attrition and casualties than were expected. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address the comment fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Psyops. And Enforcer, real quick, is there anything about that super chat that I'm missing or that might be like an Easter egg in it?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, just making sure. Gotta check Psyops because he throws him some sneaky ones occasionally.
Psyops has been flagged as a national security threat to the LSA, so he gets patted down each time.
Yes, now that we've patted down Psyops super chat, he says Edward Kill is the only decent Russian soundtrack of my generation.
Oh, it's that guy, Matthew.
It's the troll.
He died in 2012. Rip.
Oh man.
But yeah, I mean, what a sound this guy had. Like, look at his face. It's iconic. Like, this guy is the meme of the 2010s. Like, so many. Oh God, that's horrendous right there. Look at him.
Oh, I'm unmuted. I just realized I'm unmuted.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah. No, that's fine. The wheezing adds to the comedy of this all. But man, this is hilarious to me. I remember this now. It's all coming back to me. But anyways, with that, Psyops, I thank you so much once again for the support, and of course, so with that, we're on to the next one. Thank you so much once again.
All right, and it looks like for our last super chat of the night, we have a $2 donation from CA Lags, who says, it seems Zorro has been busy marking the bad guys.
And I believe he has. I don't know specifically who Zorro is, but someone is out there doing that job, and it may be him. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address the comment. And I believe you said that was our last super chat?
Yes, so now we're moving on to our live chat questions. And first up, we have the Morse code decoders, Mark Hodges and WF2U, who say the Morse code reads, Ukraine will continue to push the Russians out of their land and Slava Ukraine.
And I think they will, and it looks like they are. And so with that, I thank y'all both for deciphering the Morse code message. It's good to see that Mark has now been rejoined by WF2U. We're still wondering where Ashley is, and hopefully Ashley resurfaces soon. I like to see the trio of Morse code readers, not just the duo. Although there's nothing wrong with the duo, I'd like to see that we have an army of Morse code readers out there. But thank you so much to both of y'all once again for being here and making sure to decipher, I know it's not deciphering, it's reading, to decipher, to read the Morse code. It is great to know that we have that kind of talent here in the Lee Spring Army, and I'm glad that y'all been enjoying these day after day. And with that, we are on to the next. Also, real quick, due to time reasons, because it has gotten quite late and the stream has gone on for quite some while, we will only be able to answer about 5 questions from the live chat from here. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right. And up next, we have a question from Richie MC, who says, a Christmas truce event. Enforcer, did you hear what happened in Syria between Americans and Russian soldiers? Handshake and photo. What are your thoughts?
I did not hear about that, but if that did happen, every once in a while there just is a little bit of, I guess you could say, sportsmanship in war, and I guess that would be an instance of sportsmanship if it did occur. Although I did not hear about this specific instance. But once again, I didn't really hear a lot about Syria because I didn't really pay a lot of attention to Syria beyond 2012. You know, the Arab Spring, I guess you could call it. So with that, I hope that addresses the comment fairly well. And we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Scott2412, who says, is there still a lot of corruption in Ukraine? I'm not sure why the spreadsheet turned that to Spanish, but it meant to say corruption.
There is a lot of corruption. Now I'm going to make it French. Au revoir. Anyways, there is a lot of corruption in Russia. That is incredibly evident, especially due to the election rigging that they do every year. That is a telltale sign of rampant corruption throughout the entire Russian governmental system. So I would have to say that there is a load of it in Russia, and there's really no way to get around it. Also, speaking of corruption on a Russian level, that corruption sometimes extends to other countries, like how cops sometimes in France and also Spain don't really protect foreign tourists from muggers and also scammers, although they'll protect locals from it, which is a form of corruption that ought to be curbed if you want to keep your tourism industry alive. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Melissa Harden, who says, what would happen if you put together an F-16 with a parts kit and had an unknown part left over?
Well, I mean, you probably have to take the whole thing back apart and put it back together again to see, or do an entire check of the aircraft that's been assembled and see if it was made correctly. So with that in mind, I feel like that would be the most logical route to take. But then again, I'm not really an aircraft manufacturing specialist, so I wouldn't really know. And you know one thing, Matthew, I just said this. Aircraft manufacturing specialist. That sounds like some kind of goofy corporate title that someone would have come up with in an office. You know, like I don't know what happened to simple terms for people like a greeter or a cashier or a fry cook or something like that. Everyone gets special names these days. They're just goofy. Like at Publix, I was called a customer service associate. Why not just call me a cashier? Because that was my job. Well, then I got turned into a janitor pretty much. But why not be called a cashier? You know, like that never made any sense to me. Why all of these names these days have gotten so goofy? Like managers are no longer managers; they're now employee. They're employee leadership specialists or something like that. Like, why can't the names just be what they used to be? It's not degrading; it's the job. Like I would much rather go to like you know, I worked at another place. I won't say the name because, well, I don't think it would hurt, but I used to work at a restaurant for an incredibly short amount of time because COVID came back around and, you know, blah. But anyways, I worked at a restaurant and you weren't called anything special there. You were called a server. That was your job. You weren't called anything stupid, like silly or goofy. You know, I just say, I just believe that names ought to be simple and ought to get the point across, you know, instead of all this goofy stuff. And I've seen... And this is just me, you know, this is just me extending this as a equal plane across everything. I've seen that happen a lot in the military area as well. You know, instead of just saying it's a gun, guns shoot people, you know, like something like that. Instead, it's a weapon that is to dispatch people with a high velocity metal projectile at a high speed. You know, it's like, why can't we just say what it is, like just plainly, and what it does? You know, it just doesn't make any sense to me. And I just saw someone say, euphemisms, Carlin, yes. And I think I remember George Carlin saying something like that. I actually think I remember that bit. But this is entirely my own thing. Like, I find that highly annoying. But anyways, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Kat Nico, who says, it seems the need for blood has so consumed them that they would turn on their own brothers to sate it. They will probably rebel altogether. How do you think this will affect the war?
I think mutinies will affect the war greatly because you'll have to be pulling off frontline units to deal with these mutinies and put them down. And so I think it'll most likely lead to a manpower drain on the Russians altogether and really end up being just a complete negative for them. That will cancel everything out because if the soldiers start mutinying, you have to go and deal with the mutiny. So you got to bring in non-mutinying soldiers to put those guys down. And that's tying up way too much manpower, both for the mutinying guys and the guys putting them down, that it just doesn't make any sense. And so with that, I hope that addresses that comment fairly well. And I think we are on to the final question of the night. If I'm correct, Matthew, if I was counting right.
And this is the final question of the night. But real quick, I just saw Try and Take Alaska say in the live chat. I thought this was pretty funny, so I got to repeat it.
I saw it.
He said, merchandise relocation engineer equals thief.
Oh, man. Yeah, I cannot stand that kind of stuff. And also, let's see, I'm trying to see if there's... a garbage man is an environmental engineer. Yeah, custodial engineer. Let's see. Yeah, I just can't stand that crap. Like, when you go looking for a job, you don't even really know what the job is anymore. Like, you're no longer a night guard or a security guard or anything. You are a theft prevention specialist or something like the names got stupid. Why in the world is third class on a plane called economy class? Like, who in the world is coming up with these stupid names? Like, you know, like on a train, like when you go to Britain and you get on a train, it's no longer third class. It's now first class. Oh, no.
It's crazy.
Like it doesn't make any sense to me. Everyone was like, everyone at some point in a corporate board meeting was like, what if we made the bottom option sound like the top option? And then we made all the higher options sound a little bit better. What if we did that? And they're like, yeah, it's a great marketing ploy. And it's so stupid. It's like starting off your labeling convention with large, extra large, and extra, extra large. That is still a small, medium, and a large. You just went and renamed it and made it a whole lot more complicated.
It's crazy. And Enforcer, you know what else is crazy?
What?
Paul Plonsky has gone 56 days without cigarettes.
Hey! Hey, what do you know, man? And cigarettes, from what I've heard, is a hard thing to drop. I do have friends in my reenacting group that have smoked cigarettes. Some of them have not stopped, but they always talk about how bad it is. And good job, Paul Plonsky, for going 56 whole days, nearly 2 whole months, without cigs. And so I hope that you keep it up, because, you know, hopefully that helps you get a little bit healthier. Hopefully it helps to keep your lungs a lot healthier, as well as, I believe this only applies to dip, but your gums? I think that may also be something with cigarettes, although not too much. But anyways, congratulations once again, Paul. I mean, and I thank you for sharing that with me, Matthew. And everyone give a huge congrats to Paul for 56 days cold turkeying cigs. That's got to be tough as hell. And I hope that you keep it up, man. We're all rooting for you, and we hope to hear that it's 90 days and 100 days and 150 days. And getting back to the Aaron saying anti-smoking engineer.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Enforcer, I think we have to move on to our final question of the night because it's starting to get very late, if that's fine with you.
And that is true. So let's hear that lucky last question of the night.
All right. And that viewer is Justin Norse. And he says, Enforcer, Putin is expected to meet with Erdogan on Thursday. Could Turkey be trying to host peace talks between Russia and the West in a bid to end the war in Ukraine?
They could be. Turkey does Turkey things, so I don't know what they're doing. Like, Erdogan could be, like, flipping sides tomorrow, because that's Turkey. But I don't really know what Turkey will be doing. Maybe it might be something like that. They might be seeing about trying to broker a peace deal, because it seems that Turkey has now become the neutral party in this entire affair. And whenever there's any kind of talks or agreements to be had in between the Ukrainians and the Russians at any given point, it's almost always being conducted in Turkey now. And so with that, I hope that addresses that question fairly well. And it is now time to round out tonight's stream. I thank you all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure to cover the news with all of y'all and to also answer all of these interesting questions. We've had a lot of really cool questions tonight, a lot of funny moments, and also huge congratulations to Paul Plonsky again, considering that just happened, that he has been 56 days SIG-free, and I hope we are able to see you reach 2 entire months SIG-free. And so with that, thank you all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time for the Sunday night fundraiser. Have a great night, everyone. Take care, and I hope to see y'all then so the Lee Spring Army can blow through another fundraising goal. Thank you all once again, and have a great night. Take care, and I'll see y'all then.